Jaden Daniels is going to be missed. How much? Well, that's the question. That's the reason we've got Carter here from Power Hour LSU, Power Hour SEC as well. We'll talk to Carter and find out about some of his other initiatives here covering football top to bottom across our great nation. Carter, how you doing today?
It's spring football, Mark. You know, this is one thing where the NFL has over college. It's how much more tight their offseason is. And now with signing day and NIL and all of it, it just seems the college football calendar is kind of just all over the place. And what's very interesting, Mark, is while all these things are going on, actual football is being practiced across SEC teams in the Southeastern Conference, right? Spring football is underway, and there's no shortage of storylines with the Garrett Nussmeier era getting ready to kick off.
That's it. That's it right there. And people do still get excited about spring football, but yeah, our attention is divided in so many ways as college football fans toward all the realignment rumors, toward NIL, toward the transfer portal, that spring football doesn't have that cachet like, wow, this is everything. Let's read those reports from spring practice and find out who might have tweaked an ankle today. But we will start with Garrett Nussmeier because we saw him on the big stage against Wisconsin. Excellent performance there. And your thoughts about, we've heard your evaluation a number of times of what you expect out of him. He's obviously had to step in meaningful games, meaningful snaps, Auburn in particular recently. But in terms of also how the offense will change with just a much different player at that position.
Yeah, so the one thing that's interesting, you look at the guys out west, the Vegas guys, have Garrett Nussmeier, the third best Heisman odds, and you look at the last couple of Heisman Trophy winners, Mark, it's been Caleb Williams, who was high on the Heisman odds, and Jaden Daniels. You know, as magical as Jaden Daniels' season was, he was still second best Heisman odds going into next season. So if you're an LSU fan, that obviously makes you very excited with Garrett having so much hype going into next year. And he is a real deal. Like him and obviously Jaden are two completely different types of quarterback. Garrett just really doesn't run at all. And Jaden is arguably the best runner we've ever seen in college football history at the quarterback position, along with Michael Vick and obviously Lamar and so on and so on. So Garrett Nussmeier, of course, this will be, Mark, the most – I say questionable, but it's not quite questionable, but it's the most mysterious wide receiver room LSU's had in quite some time. You know, you look historically, more often than not, LSU has a bona fide first-round draft prospect type of wide receiver in every single room going into the season. There is no Malik Neighbors going into next year. There is no Kayshawn going into next year, but Mark, I think Kyron Lacy is a real deal. When you really break down, you take out his drop issues, Kyron Lacy is a very special wide receiver prospect. I don't like to use that word special a whole lot, but if you actually look at his route running, you look at his blocking, he is a total package receiver if he can limit the drops. And then obviously the next two receivers are the transfers. CJ Daniels coming in from Liberty and Thomas coming in from Mississippi State, who I love a lot, Xavion Thomas. So this wide receiver room is still going to be loaded. And what's very fascinating, Mark, is Brian Kelly has hammered home to the media how much more he wants to get better at running the football. One minor story, Mark, with LSU last year was the running back room faded because the offense became so much of Jaden Daniels just dropping back and running or throwing. They didn't need running backs to run the football well at all. Now you will need it because you don't have the running game from Garrett Nussmeier. So the running back room, which is very thin this spring, is going to have to step up.
Yeah, we know Logan Diggs is going to stay in conference, play for Ole Miss.
Yeah.
When you look at the rest of this group, a lot of guys that are coming back, Josh Williams comes to mind. Your thoughts about how they may fit together, who does what well, and is there hope that this is going to be a LSU running game that we're accustomed to?
Yeah, so Caleb Jackson is probably the most hyped prospect since Leonard Fournette when it comes to the LSU running back room. You know, like Leonard in his true freshman season, Caleb Jackson had a few truck stick highlights that made its rounds, not just in the SEC, but all of college football. So he's going to be the lead back. Obviously, during spring, they never like to really run Josh Williams because of his injury history. Trey Holly's going through some legal stuff. And then obviously the most hyped offensive recruit. And this also, Mark, I do my own grades on all the prospects coming in. My number one prospect is Caden Durham, right? A top 100 4-star freshman who is a track and field superstar. And Mark, he is one of the most productive Texas high school football running backs of all time. And he did it at Duncanville, one of the best programs in an offense that is loaded with other 4 and 5 stars. And he was the best player on that offense. So Caden Durham's going to come in, and obviously he's running track right now, so he'll come in later this offseason. But he is a very special prospect, and I think he will get playing time right away.
And so, yeah, the situation that you outlined with Jaden Daniels playing quarterback is unlike anything that I can remember, because you mentioned Lamar Jackson and Michael Vick, who I would argue had more wiggle and more dynamic plays in the running game. But Jaden Daniels, to your point, might be the most effective runner at the quarterback position in the history of college football. And then you mirror that together with what they did at running back. Those other quarterbacks did not take the top running back completely out of the game. They had top rushers that ran for 500-800 yards, whatever the figures were. But Jaden Daniels just was a one-man show. And now they got to kind of reinstitute a traditional running game with a much different quarterback. It's just a crazy transformation.
Yeah, and this is where it gets very fascinating. I'll say this for the end, Mark. The best position group is the offensive line for LSU, right? So this is why they feel the running game can get better, is this offensive line with Will Campbell and Emory Jones, both of which could go in the first round of next year's NFL draft. Pro Football Focus has Will Campbell as the number 1 offensive tackle returning and Emory Jones as the number 9 offensive tackle returning. I truly do believe this offensive tackle duo, along with this entire offensive line, could be very special. The only position they have to sort out is center, right? And they believe DJ Chester is probably going to win that job. And he was a top 100 recruit coming out of high school. So the offensive line is going to be really special next year, Mark. It's going to give Garrett Nussmeier a lot of time back there to find open receivers. And LSU's going to have a new offensive play caller next year with Joe Sloan. So Joe is very well regarded at LSU, not only as a play caller, but as a recruiter. He's got the best high school football recruit in the history of LSU football, and Bryce Underwood committed to 2025 5-star quarterback. So Sloan as a play caller, we'll see how he does next season. But so far, the early returns in the Wisconsin game are pretty good.
And Mason Taylor's still around?
Yeah, and that's going to be something else. Mason Taylor, the son of obviously Jason Taylor, is a big-time tight end, right? This is a guy who was one of the best blocking tight ends in the SEC last year. And as a receiver, he's pretty serviceable. He's not so much deadly after the catch like other receivers on this team, but he's very reliable. He runs great routes. So I think Mason Taylor, an unbelievable athlete as well, will be a great add. And you look at another recruit that they have coming in, Trades Green, a top 100 4-star tight end who actually slid into some rankings as a 5-star. This is a young man who will come in later this offseason and hopefully provide LSU some opportunities to run some 12 personnel, which is 2 tight end sets, and that could take the LSU offense to another level as well.
Carter, I see LSU pretty much in that 7 to 10 range in the national rankings, regardless of who it is. They seem to be pretty consistent with that. Are you on board at this point?
Yeah, I think this team needs to make the college football playoff. And obviously we didn't talk too much about the defense. That's going to be by far the bigger question mark. But LSU poured more money into any coaching staff that you'll ever see on the defensive side of the football to get the absolute most highly ranked coaches across the board. Obviously getting Bo Davis from Texas, Kevin Peoples from Missouri, and Blake Baker from Missouri. And they also bring back Corey Raymond, who is the most popular position coach in LSU history to coach defensive backs. The defensive side of the football is where a lot of the questions are going to be. They think the offensive side of the football will be fine, even though Garrett Nussmeier is obviously replacing one of the best college football quarterbacks ever. So defensively, that's where most of the questions will be, Mark, and hopefully LSU will be able to answer those questions.
And if Blake Baker can replicate the Missouri defensive numbers there at LSU this year, I think everybody will be good with that. And we'll hopefully get you back on here to break down the personnel on that side of the ball. Carter, you've been looking at some NFL as well as what you do with the SEC and LSU.
Yeah, so Power Hour NFL, please go subscribe to that. Mark, you know the YouTube stuff is so weird. I had some videos really pop off, but I wasn't able to monetize it because I'm not at 1,000 subscribers. So please go subscribe, Power Hour NFL. That's all you got to do is type that in and hit the subscribe button. And I'll never ask any NFL-related questions on the college football channel because I do like to separate the two. What I will include, though, at the end, Mark, was the NFL Combine was very profitable for the LSU prospects, in particular, Brian Thomas Jr. So we'll see. I mean, I think he locked in a first-round draft pick, and LSU should have 3 first-round draft picks. But, Mark, just to give you a little behind the scenes here, I know you cover all of college football, and you have a lot of Michigan fans. I've been told for months, okay, that J.J. McCarthy would be selected in the NFL draft before Jaden Daniels, okay? And as time has moved on, Mark, I'm starting to really believe it. I've seen more mocks, more people that were at the Combine who have sources and all of that. I'm not some masterful source guy, but this was someone that I trust. It's been in the NFL a long time. And he said, do not be shocked if it happened. And there is a growing piece of me that a team will make that mistake and take J.J. McCarthy over Jaden Daniels, even though I think J.J. could be a good NFL quarterback. So that's just one thing I've been hearing, and I think that would be so fascinating if a team were to do something that drastic.
And Carter, we're still waiting on both players' pro days, correct?
Yes. Yeah, and that's a funny thing. You know, Jaden didn't do anything this past weekend, and part of me is thinking, well, is the NFL trying to punish him because he didn't work out this past weekend? But it's really up in the air. I feel like Caleb Williams is going to be the number 1 guy, but I think after that, it's going to be the most circus NFL draft we've seen because of how fascinating these quarterback prospects are. I think Drake May could be a good pro. I think J.J. McCarthy could be a good pro. I just would not make the mistake of passing up on what could be the next Lamar Jackson in the NFL and Jaden Daniels. I don't believe that would be a smart move. And I understand I got a Joe Burrow painting in the background. I got a Jaden Daniels bobblehead right over here. I know that's what a lot of your neutral viewers would say, but I really do think Jaden Daniels will be a big-time NFL quarterback, and I think it'd be stupid to not select him at least 2nd overall. Hell, I'd take him 1st overall. But we'll see what happens.
So is the separation elite athleticism in the open field and in the pocket, navigating the pocket, or is it arm skill?
Yeah, so McCarthy has got a very underrated arm. If you actually go look at like the mile per hour ratings they did this weekend, I think only Joe Milton beat out J.J. McCarthy, and we know Joe Milton's arm is the best arm we may have ever seen at any level. One thing that is interesting, Mark, is NFL teams know that Jaden Daniels last year shouldn't have been playing, right? Because he got the extra year because of the COVID year. So, you know, he was older basically and more experienced than pretty much everyone he played, while J.J. McCarthy was only a year 3 guy on a Michigan team that was very run game focused, very defensive focused. And of course, Jaden had to play in shootouts, right? You had to empty the clip every game because the defense wasn't stopping anyone. That's just some of the things that I've heard and just seen, but I just don't see a world where you're taking J.J. McCarthy over Jaden Daniels, but people smarter than me think that could happen, and we'll see. We'll see what happens.
To piggyback off your final comment there, you probably can't select 2 quarterbacks in big-time college football that were on opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of what they had to shoulder for their football teams than those 2.
Right, and that's something else, you know, because so there was a Mike Tannenbaum quote last week, and you know, for people that know, Mike Tannenbaum was an NFL GM. I don't think he was a good one. I think he's an idiot. He said plenty of bad, stupid stuff. I'd say it to his face. And he said this comment last week that if J.J. McCarthy was in the LSU offense, he would have done what Jaden Daniels did, which is asinine, right? It's just stupid. You know, Jaden Daniels is Jaden Daniels. He's 1-on-1. But There are people that truly do believe this. And, there's just a lot of questions with McCarthy as an NFL quarterback. And it is also interesting because there needs to be like a few of these free agent quarterback dominoes, right? Like Minnesota, is Kirk Cousins really going to leave Minnesota? What's Justin Fields going to do? There's so many different factors that go into it. I still, in my heart of hearts, think Jaden Daniels is going to be a top 3 pick. But I'm just telling it, like I have tweets months ago, Mark, saying that do not be shocked if JJ McCarthy goes ahead of Jaden Daniels. And this was when JJ McCarthy was in like the 20s and 30s, right? So I've been told this for a long time. And now I see people like Brett Coleman, who's big time NFL reporter. He's at the combine. He released his first mock draft and he has JJ McCarthy going ahead of Jaden Daniels. I'm just sharing what I've been told for a while now. I don't think that actually will happen, but now I'm really starting to believe it, and it would be dumb. I'm just telling you, pass up on Jaden Daniels at your will, NFL teams, and you will be punished.
Yeah. So are there any particular fits at the top of the board that you like better for either one of those players?
Yeah. So as much as LSU fans would hate me to say this, okay, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. All right, as you know, LSU fans are mostly Saints fans. It's not quite an apple to apple thing. Mark, what's crazy is there are a lot of Saints fans that are Alabama fans, right? Because of how NFL teams are located in the Southeast. So it's not 100% Saints fans or 100% LSU fans. I say that because a lot of LSU fans hate the Falcons. A lot of Saints fans, of course, hate the Falcons. The best fit for a young quarterback is the Atlanta Falcons. They've got the best weapons to work with at the quarterback position. They just have not had a quarterback. Desmond Ridder is not an NFL level quarterback. I love that fit. That's a weak division. That's a young coaching staff. The Rams coaching staff coming over. We know what the Rams coaches have done with quarterbacks with Jared Goff and now Matthew Stafford. Whoever goes to Atlanta is going to be walking into a gold mine of young offensive talent. And I think that's where Jaden would be best served. So there is a piece of me, if I was in Jaden's camp and I started to slide down the board, Atlanta is a really good spot to land. That's an indoor stadium, so you don't have to deal with the elements. And you're going to be in a weaker NFC. So I think whichever quarterback ends up there, it could be Kirk Cousins. That's going to be a great fit because I think Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson can all play.
Power Hour NFL in
Yeah.
addition to LSU and SEC, but it's Power Hour NFL. Lock it in, get on over there right now. Just do it. Check it out. Give it a sub. Carter, appreciate you being here as always.
Thank you, Mark. We'll talk soon. Okay, buddy?
It's Georgia, so we know what's expected, and the Bulldogs are getting back to practice here in about a week. We got Anthony Dasher on the line from UGA Sports on Rivals to help us break down the Dogs on offense. Anthony, appreciate you stopping by as always. And
sure,
of course, conversation is going to start with Carson Beck.
Mm-hmm.
Had a big year with almost 4,000 yards passing, 72% completion percentage, which you're not going to find too many guys around that are going to be more accurate than that. Any particular part of his game that could possibly get better? Of course, there's always room for improvement, but realistically?
Yeah, I think the deep throws is probably something he wants to become a little more efficient with. I mean, not that he did not hit them last year, but probably not quite at the rate that, he had, maybe even some fans had kind of hoped to see. But yeah, again, that's kind of nitpicking right now when you look at the kind of year he had. You mentioned the 72% completion rate, and that was a school record. Beat the one that Stetson just set the year before that. So, Carson had a great season. But yeah, if you ask him, he'll say he can work on everything. But if I had to pick one thing, it would be the deep throws.
Anthony, the way college football moves these days, it seems like a guy like Gunnar Stockton has been in the program for forever, but that's not necessarily the case. But he certainly had a big profile coming out of high school himself.
Yep.
So where do you think his situation lies and really the quarterback battle behind Carson Beck?
Well, he's the number 2 guy right now. He came in the played the entire second half of the Orange Bowl against Florida State, and handled himself very well. Was very impressive. So they feel very good about where Gunner is at right now. He ran the scout team in his first year with the program, did an excellent job, and last year he was pretty much sharing the number 2 role with Brock Vandagriff, who has since moved on to Kentucky. He's expected to be the Wildcat starting quarterback this year. So Gunner's going to have his chances. I mean, I'm sure there'll be some games we have an opportunity to go in, and when he does, I expect him to perform pretty well.
Now, looking at running back, Dejon Edwards gone, Kendall Milton gone, correct?
Yep, that's right.
Those 2 guys gone. The big addition, of course, that caught everyone's eye across the SEC was Trevor Etienne coming in from Florida. Since you've had a look at him, both when he was with the Gators, of course, as the opponent, but now getting to scout him a little bit more since he's jumped on board. What do you think he will add to the offense?
He'll bring a lot. I mean, he's got a chance now to be the guy. That's one of the main reasons he left, Florida, to kind of get that chance and a chance to compete for a national championship. And I expect you'll see Trevor play a huge role. I mean, maybe one of the bigger, transfer pickups in the entire country before all is, said and done. I mean, I fully expect he'll rush around 1,000 yards, probably score 10, 12, 13 touchdowns, and do an excellent job catching the ball out of the backfield, which is always has been a Bulldog strength since Kirby Smart took over. So yeah, Trevor Etienne is a huge addition, but they do have some other good backs coming back too. I mean, Robert Robinson had a good Orange Bowl. Andrew Paul. Still don't know when Branson Robinson is going to be back yet. Had the ruptured patella tendon that cost him all of last year. I'm not sure if he's going to be quite ready for fall camp, and it's still a little bit unclear about exactly when he'll be ready. But getting Trevor in was just a huge pickup for Georgia.
We're breaking down the Dogs, looking at the offense here with Anthony Dasher. You can catch his work on UGAsports.com. That's the Rivals platform for Georgia athletics. And let's look at the wide receivers. Of course, we put them together with the tight ends and Oscar Delp filling big shoes. But of course, he was a big part of the offense. 24 balls last year. But Brock Bowers is Brock Bowers.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of start there, even though we would normally go with wide receivers first. Brock Bowers is Superman. So he's not going to be replaced. But Oscar Delp is no slouch.
No, he's not. I mean, he's a very good tight end. I think he got overlooked, a lot. Of course, it's easy to do when you got Brock as the main guy doing all the things that he did. But Georgia also added a transfer from Stanford. I mean, Benjamin Urasek had some very good numbers for Stanford, last year, and they think he's going to come in and really complement what Oscar does. And then they've also got Lawson Lucky, had a very good freshman year after he came back from his foot injury, and so it's has a chance to be a pretty good tight end group. Of course, no Brock Bowers. You can't ever say it's going to be just as good as last year, but still, they got some talented players.
Yeah, Urasek had some injury issues last year, only played in 6 games, but the year before, 49 catches and 43 the year before. So he's caught a lot of balls in college football, 108 there in the Pac-12. Looking at the rest of the wide receiver unit, of course, Dominic Levet was the big addition last year, and he pulled through as most expected him to be, one of the best wide receivers in the SEC. Rob Thomas came in from Mississippi State, where he had a big reputation and was their top guy, and he didn't necessarily have a huge year, but certainly contributed. So where do we stand on the wide receiver core?
That's where they made some additions, added 3 transfers. Humphreys from Vanderbilt came over. Real speed guy came in and had an excellent first year for the Commodores. Then you look at Colby Young came over from Miami. Colby caught like 60 passes in 2 years for almost 1,000 yards. 6'5", 215 pounds. Has a chance to I think make a big impression. And then Georgia also went out and got Michael Jackson III from Southern Cal, a versatile receiver, can play all 3 wide receiver positions. So you add those 3 guys to, you mentioned, Diamond Lover, Rob Thomas, Dylan Bell, who had a very good year last year, kind of doubling as a running back wide receiver. Made some incredible catches in the Orange Bowl, against Florida State. But they've also got a couple of new kids, too. Sokovia White, Nitro Tuggle, early enrollee wide receivers who they're very, very high on. So, while they also lost some key guys like Lad McConkey and Marcus Roseby Jake Saint, they they feel pretty good about, again, the addition of London Humphreys and some of these other guys they brought in, that the wide receivers to be okay next year.
You just named like 10 guys. Now,
Yeah.
about 5 of those guys are incoming freshmen that
Yeah.
who knows if they'll be able to make an impact. There's not going to be any pressure necessarily to do so this year, but about 5 or 6 guys, including the transfers coming in, have big resumes.
Yeah.
Is there a particular pecking order that you would expect out of those 5 or 6?
I still think like Dom Lovett will be the main guy in slot. And I forgot to mention Arian Smith. He's back for one more year too, so that's another name you can kind of throw in that mix. But as far as a pecking order, that's something that's going to be worked out in spring practice. I mean, Ra Thomas had a foot injury last year that really kind of curtailed the end of his season. Also, I think we saw a lot more production, from him, and Dylan Bell. I think it has a chance to take yet another step forward, this year. That it might be tough for somebody to ultimately overtake him for a starting job. But I do like the depth. They brought in some key guys. This is the most transfer that Georgia has brought in since Kirby Smart has been the head coach. And each one of these guys are guys they believe that can make some pretty solid contributions this fall.
It's easy to pin the national championships on the defense, of course. That's what people think of first and foremost. And then, of course, Stetson Bennett. And then you look at the skill position players. But the offensive line, I thought, was the best in the business when they were winning those national championships. Maybe it took a bit of a step back, but still had plenty of talent last year. Cedric Van Pran, Marius Mims, they move on to the NFL. A couple other guys, though, could have made the NFL decision, but they decided to come back. Tate Ratledge, Xavier Truss. Just your thoughts about the offensive line and how they may line up in their 5 spots up front.
Yeah, again, I think they've got a chance to be, very, very good. I mean, Ernest Green started at left tackle last year as a redshirt freshman and held him, was pretty good for the entire year. You mentioned, losing Cedric Van Pran is going to be a big loss. 3-year starter, one of the best leaders on the team. But Georgia has a guy they've been grooming for that position. Jared Wilson is another big guy, 6'4", 320 pounds, is expected to step right in at center. They have extreme confidence in him. The 2 guards are back. Micah Marzi, and mentioned Tate Ratledge earlier. Xavier Truss can play inside. He may wind up moving out to right tackle to replace Amarius Mims, but Georgia also is very, very high. On the Monroe Freeling, who's a true freshman last year, saw some time at both tackle spots and played a lot toward the end of the season. So they've got probably those guys. Dylan Fairchild's another guy at guard they can slide in. So right now they've got 8 or 9 guys I think they feel very confident in. And they signed again a huge freshman class with 5 incoming freshmen. I think all those guys are early enrollees will get their first looks as well. So Georgia will not be hurting the offensive line, I don't believe.
Anthony, do we expect the Georgia offense to look any different than it has? Has there been any talk about just any type of scheme adjustments that could make it look a little bit different?
I don't think so. I think what you saw, Coach Bobo do last year and what Coach Monk did, 3 years before that's going to probably stay status quo. I mean, some of the names may change, but what Georgia does offensively is going to be the same thing we've seen, I think, over the last 3 years. And like I said, I think they've addressed that. Losing Ladd McConkey is going to hurt, I think, on some of the, as far as the explosive plays go. But again, Georgia brought in some other talented guys. London Humphreys, who I've talked about a couple of times already, is a guy they think they can really use him to stretch the field. And some of these freshmen have some tremendous speed as well. Anthony Evans III is another guy I forgot to mention. That's like I said, Georgia has just depth. Players come from every which direction. Sometimes I can't keep up with them myself. So, but Georgia's going to be fine as far as the talent goes, and I don't expect them to change much at all as far as what they're trying to do.
Well, with a lot of those new players, I think here in about 6 weeks after we take in the spring game and, of course, all the spring sessions and the opportunities that you get out there and to see the guys work, I'll be asking you out of these new players, the incoming players, and then especially the 2024 class, who's got a chance to break out. But we'll let you take in spring practice first. Yeah. So we appreciate Anthony stopping by. Anthony Dasher, UGAsports.com. It's right there on the banner.
I'm excited. This is the second most wonderful time of the year for college football fans. It's like the precursor to what we all wait for every single fall. Get you geared up, get you somewhat excited, just a little taste of something. And for us Auburn fans, obviously, still a lot of questions out there But I think they're good questions this year, anticipating if we can take the next step. So excited just as a general college football fan, but obviously as excited as an Auburn football person too.
Yes, so Auburn fans are going to be more excited if they have hope that the passing game is going to be better. And I guess that starts with Peyton Thorne. If he's able to fend off all comers and win the job again.
Yes. So I think obviously every year for the last, 4, 5, maybe 6 years, there's been a question about who's going to be the Auburn football quarterback. Is there a competition? Is there someone better than who's currently there? And we've been just going through this scenario almost, in my eyes, just I'm tired of it kind of. And there's a little bit of that trying to be stirred up this year. Should Peyton Thorne be the starter? If you look at the depth chart, you've got a Peyton Thorne who played last year and won by the end of the season, won the job outright over Robbie Ashford. Robbie Ashford's no longer here. He's moved off to NC State, which leaves behind him Holden Garner, also Hank Brown, who is a guy who was brought in by Hugh Freeze when he first arrived, who got some playing time in the bowl game and had a pretty good, at the very end of a bowl game, a pretty good time. And then newcomer Walker White. So that's your 4 names right now that you really look at who's in the race to be the starting quarterback. But to me, and what I'm trying to get most Auburn fans on board with, is you need to make peace with the fact that Peyton Thorne's your starting quarterback until proven otherwise. Yes, there is a competition. He has to go out there and earn it. And the other guys have just as much opportunity to go out and win the job too. But you can't take away the guy's experience. He's now had a full year under Hugh Freeze. Yes, it's going to be maybe a different scheme, different offensive coordinator now. But you can't take away from the moxie that the guy clearly has and showed at times this year. So it is a question of, is there a quarterback battle? To some degree, yes. But to me, it's Peyton Thorne's job to lose at this point.
So, Kyle, is there a guy, whether he's ready or not, or could be realistically expected to be ready, that seems to be the future, that the fans love? He's got the high ceiling, he's got the big arm, and we're just waiting on him, and hopefully he can progress faster than most, and he can be ready and knock Peyton Thorne out of the starting job week 3, week 4, something like that? Or is it just a matter of we're going to go with the least damaging quarterback kind of deal?
I hope we're not doing the least damaging quarterback again this year, or whatever year it has been over the last several years. With that question, everybody's minds right now, if you're an Auburn fan watching this, is Walker White. He's the true freshman coming in. He's got all the intangibles, all the accolades out of high school. His numbers look great. He's got the charisma. He's got the leadership qualities in terms of being a guy that you can rally behind. He was instrumental in making this one of the best recruiting classes that Auburn has had in quite some time. So all the pieces seem to be there for Walker White. The big question for me, and I think for Auburn fans, if you're being reasonable, is that going to translate immediately into success as a college football quarterback? Just because you have success at the high school level doesn't mean it's going to carry over immediately to the college football level. Sometimes it takes a season. And so to me, I think if you ask that question to the general Auburn fan, the name is going to be Walker White. And I'm excited to have him here and what he potentially brings to the table, especially in kind of some of those off the field things, the way he behaves as a leader, acts as a leader, has guys rally around and to him. Those are things that have me excited for the future. Now, can he push Peyton Thorne for the starting job to begin the season, later on this season? I think he's got the capability to do it. I just don't necessarily know that it's going to be happening. And I want Auburn fans, us, to have a more healthy perspective of this year, and not to be itching every single time Peyton Thorne may not do something that you like, calling for Walker White to come in. Now, if he comes out and wins the job, I'm all for it. Like, let's go. Let's roll with whoever gives us the best shot to win. Let's just don't, as you said, use the least damaging quarterback. But to me, the battle is mainly between Walker White and Peyton Thorne. Holden Garner, I think we had hoped he would burst through at some point, and it hasn't happened for whatever reason. I don't really know the reason why. There's also a contingent of fans that are really excited about Hank Brown and what he did in the bowl game, and I love seeing him out there having a good time. But I don't see those two at this moment as, I hate to say legitimate contenders. That's too strong a word. What I really mean, can't think of anything else at the time. But to me, it's a Walker White and Holden Gardner battle at this point.
Yeah, talk about not being able to come up with the right terms. I was thinking of lesser of two evils, and that's where my mind was. But I was thinking I don't want to associate that word with a quarterback battle. Let's not go to that extreme there. So we'll go with the way it was phrased.
Sure.
Between those players. So if Hugh Freeze gets his way, if he is able to develop this offense and get it to where a Hugh Freeze offense is playing at its maximum, what is expected out of the quarterback position? Is there a certain style, a certain set of numbers that would be applicable to, okay, this team has arrived, they're playing for an SEC championship, and this is what the quarterback produces?
I think it's consistency right now from the quarterback, and whether that's consistency in numbers and taking care of the football, I think it really is across the board. I think that's what Auburn really has lacked at the quarterback position over the last several years. We've had guys with great athletic ability who can run really well with their feet, and several of those, Peyton Thorne, I've talked with you several times here, surprised me. You swore up and down, Kyle, you need to pay attention to his legs, and I didn't listen to you. And you were right. We've got guys that are better, gunslingers. Peyton Thorne's got a pretty good arm, and he showed that a lot last year in some good deep balls. So I think consistency, well-roundedness, this year, leadership quality, I think, is what's going to win out. And as I just talked about with Walker White in this battle, I think he's got some of that as such a young kid, which would make him probably the legitimate number 2 candidate for this at this point. But you just can't take away experience. Peyton Thorne's been around the block. And I think that's what's going to win out in this. I think what I understand about Hugh Freeze and his offense, since we're seemingly giving him, or he's taking the reins back a little bit, bringing in Derek Nix from Ole Miss as his offensive coordinator. Some see that as a proxy of sorts, but he's the offensive coordinator. He's going to be involved in the play calling too. I would say with the quarterback situation, a guy's got to be able to move the ball down the field. And right now, all we know is that the one who can do that the best and the most consistently is Peyton Thorne. Did he have some slip-ups last year? Yeah, sure. But there's a lot of other parts to that equation, moving the ball down the field, maybe throwing some deep balls. You got to have wide receivers actually, going to catch the ball, which is an integral part of that, and get your blocking down too. So to me, I maybe I went all around your question there. I think consistency is key. Who can air it out the best? I think those are probably the things that are going to factor most into the decision for play calling and quarterback situation.
Okay, Kyle Loomis here breaking down Auburn football. You can catch Kyle over on E2C Network for everything Auburn. Of course, we're in the midst of basketball season. Baseball has started as well. Kyle, I think that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I catch Auburn 5 or 6 times a year. And the off season seems long, and sometimes the memory fades. But what was even more concerning to me about the lack of quarterback production is that the running game carried this team in large spurts. And when that happens, that should open up things for the passing game. That should take some pressure, put people in the box, do all those things that create a balanced situation for the quarterback to succeed. And this team played the likes of Georgia and Alabama to the wire with little passing and able to carry it on the ground. And that didn't open up the passing game. So is the ground game going to be able to thrive coming up this year based on the personnel coming back and just based on probably having to, again, take that step forward to lead this offense?
I think the personnel is there. Jarquez Hunter is back. Last year had a bit of an off-season issue. We'll just leave it at that kept him out of the very first game and some other time as well. And it frankly kept him from getting off to a good start. He really, I can't remember what game it was at this point, but it took him a while to actually have one of those stereotypical Jarquez Hunter games where he is just running all over people, running over people, jumping over people. But I can distinctly remember that game in my mind, just not the team we were playing, where I just saw, okay, Jarquez is back. Took him a while to get there. You talk about Jarquez Hunter. You've also got names returning like Damari Alston, Brian Battie, and Jeremiah Cobb. A very similar situation here is kind of developed between the incumbent of sorts for the quarterback situation and the running back. So you got the Walker White versus Peyton Thorne dynamic in quarterback. You got the Jarquez versus Jeremiah Cobb dynamic. Jeremiah Cobb showed us that he's ready to compete at the college football level. Now, is he an every down back type of guy? I don't know. We'll see how the offseason treats him and how he treats himself during the offseason. What I know is the dude can run the football between the tackles, and boy, is he fast on the edges, where you saw him have some success a lot. So I think you're going to see Jeremiah Cobb have a little bit more time and a few more carries this year, but Jarquez Hunter is the guy. And there's a reason that he was pushing Tank Bigsby several seasons ago when he first arrived on the scene for time. It's because he's just an athletic freak of nature. At times, Auburn last year really kept themselves in the game with a running game. A lot of that was because of what Peyton Thorne especially was doing with his legs at the quarterback position too, opening up some opportunities there. But you're right. It didn't seem as the success that was being had by the running game didn't really open up the passing game as much as it seemed like. And so that's kind of like when we were talking about the quarterback situation, who can air the ball out the best, but keeping it about the running backs, the personnel is there. I'm really excited about this group. I think a lot of people sleep on Damari Alston, who's effectively number 2 still right now in the depth chart. I think this group, if they step up to the level that they're capable of this year, Auburn will have one of the best running back rooms in the SEC this year.
Jarquez Hunter, almost 1,000 yards, despite that slow start. 7 touchdowns, caught 18 balls out of the backfield. You may be thinking of the Ole Miss game when he had 15 carries for 91 yards, and then that surged him forward for 3 consecutive 100-yard, well over 100-yard games against Vandy, Mississippi State, and Arkansas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that one definitely is the one that I was thinking of. I felt like there was one sooner than that. But, I don't know that necessarily it was the off the season issues that got him off to the slow start. It could have been just the fact that he missed a little bit of time and everybody else had a few more reps than him. And, it was a little bit more in sync with everything there. Listen, this is a team sport. The running back situation is affected by how the quarterback plays and especially by the offensive line play too. That's improved at times last year, but it's not improved the ways we need it to. But there's also some of this that falls on the running backs too. They've got to play a little bit smarter, make some better decisions on cuts and things like that. There's room to improve across the board, and that falls on the running back room too. But I think with experience, the skill sets that are quite a variety, and I didn't even mention Brian Petit. Let me throw that in there too. He is surprisingly strong for a guy that small. A lot of people kind of dismissed that he would be able to run between the tackles, but we saw a ferocity from that guy that I dismissed too. So I think there's unique skill sets, experience at the running back room that's really going to serve Auburn well in the running game.
It just means more, but it doesn't make more. But should it? Hey everyone, welcome to the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by for the best discussion, debate, and analysis based on your participation. We appreciate the comments down below. Guess what else we appreciate? Your contributions. Please hit the like button and subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football in the midst of one of our many off-season projects, breaking down network TV ratings. Please check out the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Big 12. And yes, let me address a few things before we dive into the SEC. One would be that people are commenting down below, and rightfully so, market matters when these games kick off. It actually doesn't as much as you might think. Primetime is given a lot of prestige, but with the Fox noon kickoff and even the kickoffs on ESPN and ABC proving to be just as lucrative and just as watched, if not more than primetime, the whole aura around primetime is way overrated. We will look at that. And then also people bring up the networks. Yes, more people are going to watch on Fox than they will on FS1. The same exact game. Yes, we understand that. More people will watch on ABC than ESPN. Some of that is just simply because there's greater distribution. Other is because there is a perceived status to a particular game if it's on a network. Believe it or not, you guys are hardcore college football fans. You're going to watch the games that you want. However, there's are folks out there that just watch a few hours on Saturday afternoon. And if it's on Fox or ABC, they just watch whatever football game is presented to them there. So yes, that is a factor We have not forgotten about that. We've had a lot of people criticize the videos. Not a lot. Most of you very appreciative, and we appreciate that. But people commenting about that, and rightfully so. But check out last year's videos. We pulled it all together at the end. We have that perspective, believe me. All right. Also, let's take into consideration, we do not have CBS Sportsnet. We do not have SEC or ACC network ratings. I've got some access that I can find to SEC network ratings that are unofficial. Now, the ACC network, now back when I was in the industry, I'm guessing this is still the rule. I haven't been out of the industry for too long, that there were not ratings available for 5 years. So the ACC network, I believe, kicked off in 2019. I believe it was 2019. Yes. Therefore, there would still not be official ratings released to the public. With the SEC starting in 2014, I don't know why there aren't those ratings. Let's keep a few things in mind. If we do find some unofficial ratings, and if you have found them, please send them in. Let me know where I can find ACC, SEC network ratings. Let's keep in mind that the distribution, the subscription rate for the SEC network, when it launched back in 2014, was equal to ESPN2. ESPN pushed it heavily, and that launch was extremely successful. Not so much for the ACC. I don't know what the current numbers are, but we know with ESPN subscription rate falling, meaning that at its peak, out of about 113 or 14 million TV homes in America, that ESPN eclipsed 100 million at one point. Not for a long, long stretch of time, but over 100 million homes. That figure's in the low to mid 70s right now. So they have lost about 20 or 25% of its audience. Therefore, the SEC network ratings, you would think, just by sheer numbers, couldn't be as good as they were 5, 6, 7 years ago. And the same with the ACC network, just from 2019 until now, that those numbers would suffer. And of course, the ACC is not as popular as the SEC, so we can equate that the network isn't going to do as well, even if it had the same distribution. All right, let's get to the SEC ratings. And again, please like the video and share these videos out on social media. Week 1 in the SEC, of course, big non-conference games, highlighted by this one. LSU Florida State drew over 9 million viewers. That's one of the top-rated games of the season. Let's also keep in mind that it was a standalone game on Monday night, meaning it had no competition. So 90-some% of these games have competition. The LSU Florida State matchup, the number's impressive, but let's keep in mind, nobody else could watch any other game. So if you're watching college football on that night, you had to watch the Bayou Bengals and the Seminoles. South Carolina, North Carolina, week 1. That was the 7th highest rated game of the week at over 3 million views, as well as we're going to include Texas, Oklahoma to get some perspective. Yes, there have been comments out there about Texas, Oklahoma and the impact. We cannot make a direct correlation. There's just absolutely no way to do that. Texas, Oklahoma in the Big 12 played a lot of Fox games, FS1 games. Also, they've got the ESPN contract, but now moving to the SEC, they will play exclusively on all the ESPN networks, including ABC. So the direct correlation doesn't hold up. And of course, the competition, the popularity of the brands that Texas and Oklahoma will be playing is going up as well. But this is giving context to a certain extent on the numbers that we saw from last year. Texas Rice still pulled an impressive number considering the opponent for the Longhorns at over 3 million viewers. Florida, Utah played on a Thursday night and only had one major matchup in competition. That was Nebraska and Minnesota. Tennessee, Virginia, not a good football game, 49-13, but still drew a nice number. And down at the bottom, Texas A&M and New Mexico at 794,000. Therefore, the SEC pulled 4 of the top 10 games, 5 of the top 12, and 8 of the top 21. And you see that Texas A&M New Mexico number doesn't look good, but considering the level of opponent, and if you look at the other games from the other conferences in like games, that's a pretty strong number. And let's go to week 2. And once again, the SEC pulls in the best number. And going forward in 2024, this will be a conference game. Of course, Bama and Texas, 2 of the biggest brands in college football, 8.76 million. Texas A&M and Miami, almost 5 million less views, but still a top 3 game, which magnifies how big Bama, Texas is. Auburn, Cal played on the West Coast. You got to think that Auburn was drawing most of those fans at 2.23 million, but that played on the West Coast at 10:30 at night, so that's an impressive number as well. Ole Miss and Tulane at 1.4 million as the SEC drew 4 of the top 11 out of 28 games rated in Week 2. Week 3, Georgia, South Carolina turned out to be a better football game than anticipated. South Carolina had an 11-point lead. So out of 30 games rated in Week 3, this was the number 2 ranked game in terms of viewership. Florida, Tennessee right behind as a primetime game. Bama and USF, of course, the Bulls gave Bama a scare with a 3-3 game in the fourth quarter, and that drew almost 5 million viewers on ABC. LSU, Mississippi State on ESPN at noon at 2.8 million. That's a nice number before Mississippi State tanked the rest of the season. Arkansas, BYU also eclipsed 1 million views. Got to mention this one. Kentucky and Akron, 115,000 people watched on ESPNU. That is going to be one of the lowest numbers for an SEC team. On to Week 4, and the top 3 games of the week were in other conferences. Bama, Ole Miss at 4.6 million, rated number 4 out of 32 games total. Arkansas and LSU chimed in at 2.4 million. Auburn, Texas A&M over 2 million views, as well as the SEC grabbed 3 of the top 9 spots. Georgia, UAB, of course, not much of a football game. Mizzou and Memphis playing on ESPNU actually was a good game, as the Tigers turned out to have a really good team, meaning the Mizzou Tigers, but they only won this game by a touchdown as the 30th rated game out of 32 on the week. Let's go to Week 5, 28 games rated. Georgia, Auburn, number 2 at 6.4 million. LSU and Ole Miss played a barn burner on ESPN. Over 100 points scored, 3.7 million people watched it. Bama, Mississippi State, not much of a game. 3.3 million. There we see Texas. There we see Oklahoma playing Iowa State. Surprisingly low number for a conference game with Oklahoma involved at just about 800,000 folks. Florida, Kentucky played a noon ESPN game at 2.3 million. On to Week 6, and this is what Oklahoma and Texas bring to the SEC. When the two get together, the highest rated game of the week, and that should continue as SEC members, you would think, with that SEC audience tuning in more so than they would for an out-of-conference game. 7.8 million. So the top-rated game of the week out of 25. Bama, Texas A&M was number 2, right behind, with just about 600,000 less viewers. Georgia, Kentucky was a blowout, and that's another factor in these ratings. Although people typically stick around with the game that they want to watch, even though it's a bad game. I don't do that, but it's been proven that most people do that really bad football games that were originally supposed to be good matchups still hold a rating. There is obviously some impact by a good game versus a bad game. Kentucky and Georgia, 51-13. Primetime game on ESPN drew a lot of viewers initially, but I'm sure that dropped off in the second half. Had it been a good game, I'm sure the number would have been decidedly better. It was at 3.19 million. LSU and Mizzou at 2.3 million. That a really good football game. So only 4 rated games because of the SEC network situation out of 25. But the SEC delivers 4 of the top 9 games of the week. The SEC with another 4 out of 10 in terms of the top 10 games of the week in Week 7. 35 rated overall. Texas A&M and Tennessee topped the list on CBS at 4.38 million. Bama, Arkansas, 3.4. Georgia, Vandy, top 2 million. And so did Auburn and LSU at 2.16 mil. That 2022 Bama-Tennessee matchup in Knoxville, where Tennessee finally broke a 15-game losing streak to the Tide, 52-49. Last-second field goal. Incredible game, incredible scene. Drew one of the highest ratings of the year. But anytime Bama-Tennessee get together, even though the Vols were basically out of it at this point, they still played a good first half, had Bama on the ropes, and delivered this rating. 8 million views, number 2 game of the week. Oklahoma UCF, surprisingly, 2+ million, as UCF took Oklahoma down to a 2-point conversion, so a good game may have drawn more people late. Ole Miss and Auburn at 1.8 million. Arkansas, Mississippi State, despite a sluggish 7-3 game and 2 teams that were out of it, drew over 1 million views. Texas Houston at 3 million as well. out of the Big 12. Week 9, 35 games rated, including the top game of the week. Georgia, Florida, not surprisingly, almost 6 million people watched it. Oklahoma, Kansas was a really good game, and Kansas pulled off the upset. 3.6 million watched it. Tennessee, Kentucky, 2.5 million. Texas, BYU, just about the same number. South Carolina, Texas A&M drew almost 2 million. So the SEC accounted for, with the extension of the teams from the Big 12, Texas and Oklahoma, 5 of the top 10. So in terms of 2023, 3 of the top 10. And by extension, again, 5 of 10. 38 games rated in Week 10, including this gigantic matchup, which over the past 15 years or so has turned into one of the premier matchups in college football in regards to the standings, but even more so in terms of popular brands getting together and drawing tons of viewers. This one ranks consistently year to year. Bama LSU, top game of the week, 8.8 million, one of the most watched games in college football all season. Georgia, Mizzou at 7 million. Nice figure there. We know that it had a lot to do with Georgia. It was on CBS at 3:30. Bama LSU was the primetime game, and Mizzou playing better football, and it was a decent game. Oklahoma State, the last time Bedlam gets together in quite some time, 3.7 million. Texas, Kansas State. That game went to overtime. Almost 3 million people watched it, and there we see a couple other SEC games that were pretty competitive games, really competitive. I watched Texas A&M and Ole Miss. They went down to a last-second field goal, 1.8 million. Arkansas, Florida also went down to the wire at over 1 million. And keep in mind, this Arkansas-Florida game at number 15 for the week out of 38 and over 1 million doesn't look impressive on the surface, but number one, neither team's that good. And it's not anywhere close to a given that a game on ESPN2 is going to draw over 1 million views. On to Week 11 with 37 games, and Georgia Ole Miss tops in the SEC at 4.8 million. Not much of a game as Georgia rolled in the second half. Tennessee Mizzou at 3.6 million, a top 5 game. Texas TCU, that was a close game, surprisingly. So that had to draw in some late viewers. Bama Kentucky was a blowout, but still a top 10 game at 2.7 million at noon on ESPN. Oklahoma, West Virginia was a complete rout, 2.3 million. And then we've got Mississippi State, Texas A&M. And that was an ESPNU game at 409,000. Georgia, Tennessee, one of those traditional SEC matchups that people show up for. 5.7 million. That was the top-rated game of Week 12. Texas, Iowa State's there at 2.5 million. Florida, Mizzou. And there you see on down the line, Oklahoma, BYU was a close game unexpectedly. And then a couple out-of-conference games where the SEC brings in the numbers, especially LSU and Georgia State. Nobody else playing Georgia State is going to come anywhere close to 741,000 people watching as the 19th rated game out of 35. Nobody watched Arkansas and FIU. Rivalry weekend in college football. More people watch games. That's all there is to it. You're going to see the biggest numbers overall in Week 13. Auburn, Bama, 9+ million. Now, keep in mind that I believe this was the second highest rated game of the entire season, but still 10 million plus behind Ohio State, Michigan on the same weekend. Georgia Tech at 5.5 million. Florida State over 5 million as well. Mizzou and Arkansas, this number impresses me because the game was a blowout. Mizzou crushed Arkansas. But people are used to watching Friday football, Black Friday. There was competition in regards to other games being played. Not as many as on a Saturday, but for Mizzou and Arkansas, with Arkansas being a bad football team that finished 4-8, drawing 4 million views, there you go. That's the SEC, that's Friday, that's CBS, that's all those things put together, despite a lousy game and one of the two teams being a bad football team. Ole Miss and Mississippi State, I've said it a zillion times, a stroke of genius starting back in 1998 that these two teams would get together on Thanksgiving and on rivalry weekend when they're getting crushed by all the big national rivalries, that they would separate themselves, get their own time slot on Thanksgiving night, and it has worked out well. 2.2 million people watched it despite the NFL being on at the same time. Oklahoma TCU also eclipsed 2 million, as did LSU and Texas A&M. The Big Ten's Elite drew the most viewers. for any games. Ohio State, Michigan, nothing can touch it. 19 plus million. Ohio State, Penn State, almost 10 million. Penn State, Michigan, plus 9 million. But overall, the SEC has more depth in the conference on the field, but also in terms of eyeballs being drawn to games. The top 10 is an impressive list. And also consider some of the games that we went through that didn't make the top 10, that would make the top 10, would make the top 3 or 4 in the Big 12 or the ACC or what was the Pac-12, and would certainly be ranking higher in the Big 10. Let's look at the numbers. Bama Auburn, 9+ million. Bama LSU, Bama Texas, Bama Tennessee. See a theme? Oklahoma Texas will bring that value to the SEC starting in 2024. Bama Texas A&M, number 6 rated game in the SEC. These are just conference games. So, for example, Florida State, LSU, not included. Then we see a lot of Georgia when they took on Mizzou and Auburn and Tennessee and Florida. Those were some of the highest rated games of the year. So, Bama, Georgia, and then if they're playing a semi-impressive opponent, or it's a rivalry game, of course, people are watching. So the 10th rated game in the SEC, well over 5 million people. And then we will see, based on our next chart and one of my favorites, here we go. We see that not all those 5 million viewership games could make the top 10. Why? Because 12 games reached over 5 million views. So out of 56 conference games, and of course a ton of them being played on the SEC network, those are the games that we're missing here. Those are the only games, because we've got CBS, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPNU covered, ABC as well. 38 rated here. So the other 18 on the SEC network. We've got the Alabama-Auburn game, 9+ million. Then we've got the other games that we noted, Bama LSU, Bama Texas, Bama Tennessee. So Bama consisted of the top 4 spots, all over 8 million. Then we see a trickle down from there. Then we see, in comparison with the Big Ten, and we'll size this up later, that there's greater high-end depth with the SEC drawing games plus 6 million, plus 5 million, plus 4 million. Then once we get to the 3 million figure, the Big Ten catches up again and has a ton of games in the 3 and 2 million categories where the other conferences don't even come close. And yes, out of 38 conference games rated, yes, every game went over 1 million views from the SEC. That is unmatched. On the surface, it appears as though the SEC has the best numbers overall. A lot of depth there from this conference on the field, and it translates to eyeballs. People care about the SEC. They watch the games. Our work is not done, though. Let's look at network. Let's look at time slot. All the things that you will see on our 2022 video that you can check out down below. We will wrap it up right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you being here, and we will see you next time. Big Ten SEC. Who's better? Who will be better? We are here at the Voice of College Football, breaking down the game we all love each and every day with you. Best discussion, debate, and analysis. Let's get into it. These are the two giants. They are the Power Two, as it's being referred to now. The Big Ten and the SEC. They own the most talent on the field. They produce the best results. They also have the best recruiting. They have added the best programs available, with the 4 coming from the West Coast to the Big Ten and Oklahoma and Texas, leaving the Big 12 and going to the SEC. They have the most money, the most eyeballs glued to TV sets and to online streaming, and they have the most butts in the seats. They've got everything. It's the SEC and the Big Ten. They own college football, and it's only going to get increased exponentially. But which one out of these two is better? This is why we break it down. We do it systematically. We rely on the facts, the stats, the results, but we put it into context, and then we also project it forward. So let's first go to results from the SEC and the Big Ten against each other, both as the conferences stand now going into 2024 and with the additions of those 6 schools. So let's look at the SEC and the Big Ten head-to-head. We're going to go back 5 full football seasons, so we are going to include the COVID results, but go back all the way to 2018, so evaluate 6 football seasons, the Big Ten and the SEC. In 2023, the Big Ten defeated the SEC twice. Of course, the big effort was the Michigan-Bama game, and the Wolverines marched to a national championship, defeating Alabama at the Rose Bowl in overtime. 3 losses for the Big Ten against the SEC. Iowa embarrassed by Tennessee 35-0. Ohio State embarrassed with just a field goal on the board, and Penn State and Ole Miss got together in the New Year's Six, and Ole Miss won the game in the second half. Going back to 2022, we've got a Penn State win against a bad Auburn team. So that's a Rose Bowl winning Penn State team at 11-2, defeating a 5-7 Auburn team. We also had Iowa in postseason play over Kentucky. Losses for the Big Ten. Illinois in a close game against Mississippi State in postseason play. LSU annihilated Purdue. Ton of opt-outs in these bowl games, so we can't put every game into context in regards to everybody who was missing, but both teams missing substantial players, especially Purdue. Georgia in the Classic against Ohio State, probably the most important game with possibly the 2 most talented teams on the field in the semifinal, 42-41. And now if we take into account the new entries into each conference, Georgia in that Bo Nix Oregon debut, just annihilating the Ducks 49-3. A marginal 6-7 Oklahoma team dominated Nebraska 49-14. Take it back to 2021 and that classic Music City Bowl, Purdue 48-45 in a controversial thriller over the Vols. Penn State beat Auburn, UCLA over LSU as we bring in the Pac-12 factor. On the SEC side, you've got Arkansas in a bowl game win over Penn State. Kentucky beat Iowa. Georgia in the national semifinal killed Michigan 34-11. Oklahoma over Nebraska. So this is an 11-2 Oklahoma team against a 3-9 Nebraska team. So take that into context, and Oklahoma barely won that game by 1 score. In 2020, of course, there were few matchups because of the pandemic. Northwestern beat Auburn in the Outback Bowl for a Big Ten win. On the SEC side, you've got Alabama in the national championship game over Ohio State, and you've got Ole Miss defeating Indiana. The Rebels came into that game at 4-5, and the Hoosiers were 6-1. Minnesota had its best season under P.J. Fleck in 2019, finishing 11-1, capping that off with an Outback Bowl win over Auburn. Purdue defeated Vanderbilt as well. On the SEC side, you've got Tennessee down 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, came back to beat Tom Allen and Indiana 23-22. Bama beat Michigan in the Citrus Bowl, and you've got Auburn over Oregon on the last play of the game as Bo Nix 1-1 for the Auburn Tigers over his new team, Oregon. Back to 2018, Iowa with a win against Mississippi State in postseason play. Maryland with the upset of Texas on the opening weekend. On the SEC side, it was Kentucky over Penn State. It was Auburn over Purdue in a huge way by 7 touchdowns in the Outback Bowl. Mizzou nipped Purdue 40-37, Florida over Michigan in the Peach Bowl, and Auburn with a win on opening weekend against Washington in a close football game. If we add it all up, the SEC has defeated the current Big Ten teams 17-10. If you factor in the new additions from the Pac-12 and Oklahoma, Texas, then the count goes SEC 22, Big Ten 12. So decided for the SEC since 2018. Now let's look at postseason play. And despite Michigan's national championship in 2023, we know which way this is going to go as well. We have looked at the bowl results between the 2 conferences. Let's just look at the college football playoff and see that the SEC is 9-2 since 2018. The losses, Alabama against Clemson in the 18 national championship game, and then Alabama in overtime against Michigan in this last season's Rose Bowl. For the Big Ten, 3-5, and of course Michigan won 2 of those games in 2023. Ohio State with the other win in 2020 over Clemson. If you add in USC, UCLA, Washington, Oregon, you add in Oklahoma, Texas, that SEC record goes to 9-5 when we include Oklahoma and Texas. The Sooners lost in the national semifinals in 2018 to Alabama, 2019 to LSU. Texas lost this last year to Washington in the national semifinal. For the Big Ten, Washington's the only Pac-12 team that's reached the playoff during this time period. They, of course, picked up a win in the national semifinal against Texas, but lost the game against Michigan in the national championship game. But going forward, those are conference foes. It's almost like the Alabama-Georgia situation in 2017. We're not going to count that one way or the other, for or against. Let's expand the comparison, and the best way to do that is to match up the games that they played against the other Power 5 conferences. Throw out the group of 5. Of course, we could certainly give relevance to certain group of 5 games that are some of the better teams, like Ole Miss beat Tulane this past year, and then a bunch of games that really don't prove anything because the SEC and the Big Ten are winning 90+% of those games against the group of 5, and of course are undefeated against the FCS teams in this time frame. So let's look at their matchups against the Power 5 and who fared better. The SEC has stacked up these records since 2018 against the ACC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the Pac-12. 14-9, 16-8, 5-2. That's in 2020, the COVID year. No non-conference games. 13-10, 17-9. Had their worst season this past year in going 12-13. So add it all together, and it's 77-51. The SEC winning over 60% of its games. So these are bowl games plus non-conference games in the regular season. Add in Oklahoma and Texas, and that number goes to 11-10. And now we've got an 88-61 mark. Take it one step further, and the SEC is 2-2 against Notre Dame. We'll consider them a Power 5 team, of course. Georgia got a win in Athens against the Irish in 2018. Bama beat them in the national semifinal at the Rose Bowl in 2020. Notre Dame's 2 wins were against Vanderbilt and against South Carolina in the Gator Bowl. Add it all up, it's 90 wins for the SEC, 63 losses. On to the Big Ten. Now let's just look at the current Big Ten teams. Going 12-9, 7-10, 3-2, 14-8, 9-10, and under 500 again this year in 2023 at 10-12. Against the ACC, the Pac-12, the SEC, and the Big 12. 55-51 is the total record, winning just about 52% of those games. Add in the Pac-12, bring in USC, UCLA, also bring in Washington and Oregon. They had 11 wins and 14 losses. That brings the Big Ten record to 66-65. Now let's add in Notre Dame, and of course USC plays them every year and have not fared well against the Irish in recent seasons. Also, you've got some Michigan games against Notre Dame. They lost in 2018. They won in 2019. Ohio State got 2 of those 4 wins against Notre Dame the past 2 seasons. It adds up to 4-8 for the Big Ten against Notre Dame. Add all of it together with USC, UCLA, Washington, and Oregon. 70 wins for the Big Ten, 73 losses. Roughly 150 games is a large sample size, and the SEC has a decided edge over the Big Ten, both head-to-head and against the rest of the Power 5. Now, of course, we've got to look at the specific games, and we did that as we went through this, and I got to say that except for a couple outliers, such as a Rose Bowl winning Penn State team that went 11-2, defeating an Auburn team that was under 500. Almost all of these matchups are like-seeded games. A ton of them played in the postseason, of course, so you're going to have like-seeded teams matched up in bowl games. Now, we're not going to go through the opt-out situation for every team. That generally worked itself out as well. Either the result was not that relevant because so many stars opted out, or they had equal amounts of opt-outs on each side. So if you really sift through it, the numbers are extremely accurate, and there were like-seeded contests across the board. Even the non-conference games were best playing best most of the time, and the marginal teams playing the marginal teams. So that 22-12 advantage, or 17-10, if you take the current SEC and Big Ten teams, 2023 going backward, that is substantial, it's relevant, it's valid, and also the 60-plus winning percentage against the under 50% mark for the Big Ten through about 150 games. So right now the SEC is better than the Big Ten. Let's look at this a few other ways. Let's seed the conferences going forward. I know you're not necessarily going to agree with my seedings. They can't be perfect, Everybody's going to have a difference in opinion. We could go strictly by the seedings of the conferences this past season and say, for example, in the Big Ten, Michigan's number 1, they won the national championship. Then we would say that Washington's number 2 because they made it to the national championship game. But do we really expect Washington to be the 2nd seed in the Big Ten going forward? No. So we are going to give it our analysis and seed the teams as we believe that they stand right now going into 2024. And let's see what the matchups look like and just give it a look as to what you think would happen in these matchups in 2024. The top seeds are Ohio State and Georgia. The number 2 seeds, Michigan and Texas. I still gave Michigan the nod despite losing the talent that they did off this national championship winning team over Oregon. Ducks with the 3 seed against Alabama. We've got a Penn State matchup against LSU as the 4 seeds. We've got USC and Ole Miss. We also have Washington and Tennessee in those 6 slots. Some interesting matchups on down the line with Iowa against Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Missouri, Maryland, Texas A&M. The 10 seeds are UCLA and Kentucky. At number 11, I'm going Northwestern and Auburn. The 12 seeds are Nebraska and Florida. Rutgers and South Carolina at 13, Minnesota and Mississippi State at 14, Michigan State, Arkansas at 15, Illinois, Vandy at 16. Okay, of course, the one issue is obviously that the Big Ten has 18 teams and the SEC has 16. So you got Purdue and Indiana just bringing up the bottom. So the fairest way to do it, if you were truly matching up all these teams and they were going to play games, would be to take out the 2 middle teams from the Big Ten and then seed them again and match them up. But that gives you a pretty strong indication as to what these matchups would look like, seed versus comparable seed. Now let's give the numbers and the seeding some context and perspective. The surest thing in college football over the last 15 years has been Nick Saban and Alabama. Well, Nick Saban's gone. Alabama, I believe, is going to continue to be a really good football program and maybe elite. Maybe vying for national championships. Kalen DeBoer certainly did that this past season at Washington. Maybe he can continue that at Alabama, but that is a wild card X factor, and Bama is not as certain as it's been in the past. The surest thing in college football right now is Georgia. They're recruiting out of their minds. Kirby Smart has proven to be a great game coach, great program builder. He has taken what Mark Richt has given him, and the results speak for themselves. Back-to-back national championships and possibly the best team in college football last season. Georgia is the standard in college football right now. Even though Michigan's the national champion, Georgia, over the past 6-7 football seasons, going back to 2017, has been elite. Well, the second surest thing in college football is Ohio State. They have generally been elite forever, and certainly over the last 20 years, even though they've had a couple coaching changes, 3 different coaches. Ryan Day is winning 90% of his games, and Ohio State's Ohio State. They're recruiting at the Georgia level and bringing in that kind of talent and primed for a big 2023 season. 11-2 is a down season for Ohio State. This program put it in this way. Since the probation year of 2011, going back 12 football seasons, they've gone 10-2 twice. Those are their 2 worst regular seasons. All the other seasons, 11-1 or 12-0. So they're number 2. And then we've got a situation where a lot of programs could be elite, but it's not as certain as those 2. Michigan, of course, just won a national championship, but they lost their head coach who built the program. They lost a ton of talent. And outside of peaking the last 3 seasons and going all the way back to 1997, they have been in that 9-3 territory in good times, more times than not. We've got Penn State in the Big Ten, of course. Now, they're going to be really good and continue to win 10, 11 games overall. However, are they winning big games? Are they going to compete for championships on the national level? Well, James Franklin has yet to prove that, and he's not getting over the hump in the Big Ten, and now he's got a tougher Big Ten to deal with. So Penn State's in that holding spot. Oregon seems primed to take the next elevation and could possibly be an elite program. So if we stick to the elites, Georgia, Ohio State are the most certain. Alabama's right there. Oregon looks to be in really good shape. Dan Lanning's maturing, getting better as a head coach. We would expect him to take all the great qualities he's brought to this program and improve as a game manager and continue to build the Oregon program. But the challenge is huge in the Big Ten, of course. In the SEC, you've got programs like LSU. They have proven time and time again that they can elevate to national championship standards. They're a top 5 to 10 talent program in America. They're going to continue to be strong. Texas is probably the second or third best program in the SEC. Now, Sark proved it last year. He got them to the playoff. They were outstanding. They look to be great going forward, but he's only done it one season, and he underachieved at Washington and USC. But Texas looks to be back. We've heard that before, but they broke through and did it this past season. Oklahoma, of course, ruled the Big 12 when Texas was down. Brent Venables doing a nice job. They're recruiting in the top 5 to 10, and they should be able to reclaim that position, albeit against tougher schedules in the SEC. And then you just have a glut of teams in the SEC that are capable of elevating. Ole Miss is obviously on a great trajectory right now. They just won a big bowl game to finish 11-2. Recruiting and the transfer portal have been outstanding for Lane Kiffin, but Ole Miss doesn't traditionally win. We don't see them as that kind of program because they haven't been that since the 1960s. Tennessee has. They won a national championship in 1998. Josh Heupel seems to have them in a good place. Florida, Auburn, Texas A&M all have tremendous potential. Florida and Auburn have won national championships in recent years. Texas A&M, of course, has that great recruiting base, and they brought in Mike Elko, who looks to be an outstanding coach and has been certainly during his tenure at Duke. Mizzou elevated to 11-2. Can they continue that? Well, that's kind of difficult to forecast, but Eli Drinkwitz had that one breakout season, kind of like Steve Sarkisian, one big year. And then the SEC also has this group of teams that all can be good. Everyone in the conference outside of Vanderbilt can be good, and I mean top 15 to 25 good. Arkansas, South Carolina, Kentucky, Mississippi State, all those teams have won 9 and 10 football games in the past 5 or 10, 15 years and have been that type of program, not to win championships, but to be really good. Everybody in the SEC can be good outside of Vandy. Now let's get back to our list with the Big Ten, because we need to get to one particular school that could really make or break the fortunes of the Big Ten at the highest level, and that's USC. And while Ohio State has been the most consistently elite program over the last 20 years, the last 50 years, and in some ways in the history of college football, USC at its best, meaning John McKay, John Robinson, Pete Carroll, almost can't be touched. They have been otherworldly, with Hall of Fame players tripping over each other when they have been at that place. Even if you look at Clay Helton's tenure over much of the last 10 years, USC still has a better record than most people would give them credit for post Pete Carroll. They've been basically a top 25 program over the last 10 years. Well, they need to be better than that, of course. Lincoln Riley needs to show us that he can coach up a defense and bring in the personnel, which we have indication of this offseason, to make USC great again. Then you've got that level of really good programs that either are just going to be steady, like Wisconsin and Iowa, or have some potential to break through and do special things, like we talked about on the SEC side with Florida, Auburn, Texas A&M. And that to me would be Washington. That would be UCLA. Maryland can be a decent program. They have been in decades past, and of course over the last 3 years, winning 7-8 football games under Mike Locksley, but not going to be a national factor until proven otherwise. Michigan State, Mark D'Antonio proved that he can win on the national level, finish in the top 5 to 10 in the country. But right now, Michigan State needs a lot of work, but they've got a great guy in place with Jonathan Smith. So when we size it all up, this is how I see it. Ohio State has that elite position. Michigan has over the last 3 years, but they just lost Jim Harbaugh, and we'll just have to wait and see whether they can maintain that elite status. Ohio State cannot match Georgia, Texas, Bama, even LSU to a certain extent. So at the very highest elite level, The SEC's got it all over the Big Ten right now. But you've got this layer that's extremely intriguing. Michigan, USC. USC is a game changer for the Big Ten, I tell you. Oregon maybe as well. Penn State looks to probably just be a really, really good top 10 program, top 10 team that's going to continue to go 10-2, 9-3, unless they show us something different. So at the elite level, it's the SEC. At that next level of consistently 9-3, 10-2 could pop up and contend for a national championship, that Oregon, Penn State, USC level right in there seems to have it over the SEC. But then if you get into quality depth, a lot of depth of 7-5, 8-4, 9-3, and all that potential with Auburn, Florida, Texas A&M, Tennessee, the SEC is just flat out better. And the SEC does not have the weight that's weighing down the conference that's in the state of Indiana with Purdue and Indiana. Rutgers, Greg Schiano doing a great job, 7-6, but they're never going to be a factor. Illinois is never going to be a factor. Northwestern, David Braun was exceptional this past year, did an amazing job. They are never going to be a factor. Iowa, Wisconsin, they're in a certain category where we can count on them, but are they going to contend for national championships? No. Even at the very bottom of the SEC, which of course is Vandy, take them out of the mix. They are the equivalent of whoever, Indiana, even worse in the SEC. So the SEC is the worst program out of the 34. But Arkansas can be good. South Carolina can be good. Kentucky can be good at any point. Mississippi State can be good. All those schools that I just mentioned have won 10 games in the last 10 years. You can't say that about all those schools I just mentioned in the Big Ten. You can't say that about any of them. So, the SEC has been the best conference in college football for 15 plus years. The Big Ten has generally been number 2. The ACC has popped up at times, the Pac-12 at times. But the Big Ten has generally been number 2 for 15 years. But there's been a gap on the surface at the time. I thought Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA, yes, 4 is better than 2. But Oklahoma, Texas, added to what the SEC already has, the Big Ten needs to improve. I'm looking at USC. I'm looking at Penn State. And if there's going to be some reinforcements that come out of nowhere other than the obvious, Luke Fickell, get it done at Wisconsin. Those are the programs that the Big Ten needs to truly be on par with the SEC. The numbers speak for themselves, and I put it into context. Big Ten fans may not like it, but those are the facts. That's the truth, and that's reasonable, logical context about the results and spinning it forward. It's going to be a heck of a show to watch when these two conferences get together and battle it out on the field. Not that the Big Ten's not going to win its share of big games, big playoff games, championships, because this conference will. I have no doubt about that. But will they win more than the SEC? Not unless they kick it into gear at places like Happy Valley and Los Angeles. Your thoughts down below in the comments section. Please like the video, subscribe. We're killing it here at the Voice of College Football only because of your contribution. We enjoy hearing from you. Give me a call in on the next call-in show, and we'll talk up the game we all love right here at the Voice of College Football. So let's start with the quarterback position. And unlike our situation last year, where it was a guessing game as to who was going to emerge with the job, of course, Jalen Milroe took it, ran with it, had a bit of a stumbling block against Texas, had to watch the USF game, and then boom, learned a lot and took control after that. Comes in 23 touchdowns, 6 interceptions from last year, 12 rushing touchdowns. Just your thoughts about Jalen Milroe, his development, what more you would like to see out of him this spring going into summer camp?
We saw a lot out of him last year, Mark, in terms of just the exponential growth. He took so much leaps and bounds after the struggle there against Texas, though he made some plays in that game, being benched against South Florida and had to watch that game with Tyler Buckner in there, and of course, Ty Simpson. coming in relief on those two big 80-yard touchdown drives there to win 17-3. From the Ole Miss game to throughout the remainder of the season, we saw huge growth from Milroe from a passing standpoint as well as a running standpoint. Also, what I want to see him take another step is his decision-making, but also the accuracy and the timing on short to intermediate passing routes, 10 to 15 yards on either side of the boundary. That's an area of his game that he struggled with a season ago, and I want to see him make that improvement in hitting those receivers on either side there of the boundary. Also, the decision-making in terms of knowing what you want to do with the ball quickly, not holding on to the ball so long. Of his 44 sacks he took last year, quite a few of those were him holding onto the ball entirely too long. So making quicker decisions within his reads, and then also that short to intermediate passing game, getting an uptick more is what I want to see from him.
Stephen, Julian Sayin made a decision to move on to Ohio State. Ty Simpson has been in the program a few years. What does the backup quarterback battle look like?
It's going to be intriguing, man, when you look at Ty Simpson, Dylan Larnigan, and the transfer from Washington, Austin Mack, who followed Kalen DeBoer. So going to be intriguing to see which one of those three ends up being the primary backup, or could one of those three possibly take the job from Milroe in spring ball? It's going to be very interesting. You got Ty Simpson, who does have knowledge of the system, been in here going on his third year, in the program. A young man that came in the 2022 class, former five-star from Westview High School in Martin, Tennessee. A guy that does have a strong arm talent. You look at Dylan Larnigan, who came in the 2023 class from a powerhouse high school, Brookwood High, in Georgia. So he has a lot of promise himself, played high school baseball and football at Brookwood before coming to Alabama. And then you have Austin Mack, of whom has a lot of familiarity with this Kalen DeBoer type of system. A guy that's 6'6", 220 pounds, possesses a lot of promise. So all three of these guys are in the running to either be more than just the primary backup, but one of these three is looking to maybe take the starting job from Milroe. So it's going to be very fun to watch this quarterback room here in spring practice.
We got Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama. This is our yearly jaunt as we get prepared for spring practice. We reel in Stephen. We say, hey, let's run down the roster position by position and break things down for everyone. Getting excited about Alabama spring practice, and for the first time since 2006 without Nick Saban. All right, let's move on to running backs. Of course, Jace McClellan has made his decision to go to the NFL draft. He will be showing his athleticism at the NFL Combine in Indianapolis. Roydell Williams has moved on to Florida State. Much different running back room in regards to experience, but I got to think that Justice Haynes is the guy that everybody's looking for.
He is the guy. I mean, it is his turn. It's his time. Tremendous talent. A former five-star in the 2023 class from, by the way, Buford High School. I mean, here's a young man that really, the latter part of the season, started to get some carries, and people were like, whoa, why didn't we see more of this early on? Especially in the matchup against Michigan, he was ripping up chunk yardage plays, and you have him, but he will be joined by Jam Miller, a guy that came in the 2022 class by the way of Tyler, Texas. And Jam Miller kind of reminds you of a Kenyon Drake, kind of a Josh Jacobs type guy. He's got the speed. He's got soft hands coming out the backfield. Of course, we saw that. He caught a wheel route pass from Jalen Milroe for a touchdown in the SEC championship matchup against Georgia. So we know what Jam Miller can provide. And then you have Richard Young, who came in the same class with Justice Haynes, a young man from Florida. And Richard Young, big speed, big power, big explosiveness capability. So you really like what Young can bring to the table. And then you have two freshmen in the likes of Kevin Riley from Tuscaloosa County High School, who flipped from Miami to Alabama in the recruiting circuit. And then you got Daniel Hill, a 4-star guy at 6'2", 240 pounds, big, running back right there that can plow through some people. He's even got some soft hands coming out the backfield as well to catch the football. You got to feel like Kevin Riley and Daniel Hill will be asked to sit for at least a year and learn behind the 3 guys in front of them. So you've got Justice Haynes, you've got Jam Miller, and you got Richard Young heading up the backfield here.
Stephen, with your knowledge of what this roster has looked like for years and years and years, can you give us a comp on Miller and especially Haynes in regards to the running backs in the past that maybe they remind you of anybody in particular?
Well, right now, Justice Haynes has got a lot of Najee Harris. He's got a lot of Najee. Athleticism, the burst, the movement, can do some of everything in the way that Najee could. Now, he's got Najee's athleticism, but the core strength and toughness, there's a lot of Bo Scarborough there. When you look at Justice Haynes also, funny I mentioned Bo Scarborough. Scarborough is one that actually has been mentoring Justice Haynes quite a bit. So he's got some Najee Harris. He's also got some Bo Scarborough. Jam Miller, I go back to, he's got a lot of Josh Jacobs. Jam Miller's got that pinball ability, that contact balance, does not go down with one guy, can stay up and get yards after contact. But where Kenyon Drake comes in, he's got the hands out the back for the catch the football. And he's got speed. He's got more speed than people give Jim Miller credit for. So I like that comp in terms of Kenyon Drake. When I look at a Richard Young, there's a lot there. There's a little Mark Ingram there. There's a little Josh Jacobs there. There's a little Damian Harris there. There's just a mixture of quite a few guys. When you look at Richard Young, there's some Derrick Henry there. I mean, he's got a mixture of about 4 or 5 backs. When you look at Richard Young, from the subtle quickness to the burst in and out the hole to when he hits the edge, there's a lot to like about Richard Young.
Talking Alabama football, getting you set for spring practice here with Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama. Steve's been joining us, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years, something like that, breaking down
about
Bama
10,
football.
About 10, Mark. About 10 years.
It's been a long time, Stephen. We have tapped you so many times. We appreciate you so much. And Stephen's expertise and his knowledge of the Alabama personnel is definitely near the top. And you can catch him Monday, Wednesday, Friday right here on YouTube at 6:30 Central. In my own words, it's a great listen. Alabama football, the SEC across the board. Stephen, this wide receiver position has been one we've talked about considerably. I don't know that it's probably beyond expectation that it can reach that 2019-20 status. That is just otherworldly that we've only seen on rare occasions out of a program. Maybe Clemson has reached it at times, and Ohio State possibly recently. But last year's group was a decent group. Ja'Cory Brooks moves on, had a disappointing year this past year, but he certainly made his big catches in an Alabama uniform. Isaiah Bond moves on to Texas, takes 48 catches with him, and Jermaine Burton, 8 touchdown receptions. He's off to the NFL draft. So a lot of new names, a lot of young players going to vie for reps here.
And a lot of young names that get a chance to step up and show who they are. And to start this off with, Kobe Prentice comes back. We saw what he did as a freshman, had 31 catches in the 2022 campaign. This past year, Prentice took a step forward. You got it right there on screen, Mark. 18 catches for him, 2 of those for touchdowns. So there's Kobe Prentice, the pride of Calera High School here in the Alabama area. You got Kendrick Law behind him, and he is a Deebo Samuel type. This is a young man that you can put him anywhere on the field, and he can make something happen for you. Was not utilized in the way that we would have liked for him to be a season ago, but now got a chance to get more out of him. Really like what Kendrick Law can bring from a speed standpoint, a hand standpoint, a route standpoint. He can block. Really good blocking receiver as well. So there's a lot to enjoy there about Kendrick Law. Can also be used on special teams. Then you got Emmanuel Henderson, an E-man who came out of high school as one of the top running backs in the country, got moved to wide receiver. The reason why, Jam Miller, a bit more build on him than Emmanuel Henderson. That's what pushed Henderson to wide receiver. But he's a guy that's got all the tools that you like to have. at that position. He's back. But after him, you got a guy like Cole Adams, who can play receiver. He can be a good return man. So he's back, another young name there. And then you dive into Jeremy Bernard, but transfer from Washington. He spent some time in Michigan State before joining Kalen DeBoer at Washington. He comes in, so he's already got Power 5 football experience. Looking forward to see what he does. He will take over from the departed Isaiah Bond, who's now at Texas. And then you got some young guys. There's some freshmen. When you talk Amari Jefferson, who came in this class from Tennessee, just a very smooth wideout throughout his entire high school career. You got Rico Scott, whom Alabama pulled in from Pennsylvania, the last Pennsylvania receiver Alabama recruited. You got to go back to 2013 that picked up Robert Foster from Central High School in Monica, Pennsylvania. Now, Robert Foster had 4.21 type speed, but Foster, of course, he had some injuries that kind of robbed us of what he could have been. Had the shoulder issue in 2015 against Ole Miss, and then he had another slight issue there injury-wise. But when he was able to be on the field, you did see the speed, you saw the burst, you saw the go-go jets he had on him. So you pick up Rico Scott from that Pennsylvania area. Excited to see what he can do, what he can give, what he can provide. And then you pick up Ryan Williams, just the absolute stud from Saraland High School, reclassified to come out in this 2024 class. That's how good that young man is. But he will not arrive to the summer. Not a spring guy, he's a summer guy. So we'll see what he does in the summer. But the most intriguing thing here, Mark, is King of Oldham, the 4-star tight end from Carrollton High School in Georgia. He has announced on social media he will move to wide receiver. Very interesting here, because King of Oldham at tight end would get, immense on-field playing time at the tight end position. With him moving to wide receiver, because Washington, Kalen DeBoer has brought in Josh Kulis, a former Washington tight end, to Alabama. Now you push King of Oldham to wide receiver to be kind of a hybrid type of player. It's going to be fun to see how quickly does that young man get on the field from a wide receiver aspect. So you lose guys with Burton going to the NFL and with Isaiah Bond and Ja'Cory Brooks finding other places, but you got a roster stacked to the deck with talent, led by guys such as Kobe Prentice and Kendrick Law being back on his Alabama roster. You also have to throw in Jalen Hale and Jaron Hamilton as well. So the talent's there. It's just now which of these young guys is ready to take the reins to be that wide receiver one here.
Hale had 5 catches and a touchdown in 2023. Don't want to put too much on Williams. As you mentioned, he's coming in later, not an early enrollee for him to break out and do anything special this fall. But in terms of top end potential, is he the guy, or how would you rank them in regards to that, superstar potential?
Still, superstar potential, I would look at Ryan Williams as the guy as far as superstar potential. Now, of course, Kobe Prentice is a star, and he's got star potential. A guy like Kendrick Law has star potential. Jalen Hale has star potential. A lot of these guys have the athletic gifts and skill set, but as far as just a guy that can come in and really truly sort of take over with what he can do, Ryan Williams is a guy that has the potential, the skill set, the confidence to really come in here and say, I'm him. I'm that guy. And a lot of people are just waiting with bated breath for his arrival when he comes in the summer to be a part of those 7-on-7, 11-on-11 type deals, the summer workout, the fall camp, if you will, to get to work with Jamarcus Shepard as the wide receivers coach coming over here from Washington. So Williams carries the marquee star-studded potential, but all the guys on this roster, they all have the ability to kind of separate themselves from the pack. It's just which one will absolutely do it.
Stephen, you mentioned the tight end coming in from Washington. And then we also have, of course, the transfer from Maryland from a year ago. C.J. Dupre had 11 catches. How do we stand at tight end?
Right now, tight end, I think Dupre is still the guy. I think he's still the number one tight end here with it being him. And then behind him, you got Robbie Oots, of whom I think you'll use more of an H-back, blocking back type of guy, though he does have the hands to catch the football. So I look at the Dupree number one. I look at Oots kind of as your H-back. I think your number 2 tight end could very well be Josh Cubas. I think he's going to be your number 2. I think he's going to very well be your number 2 because you got, Ty Lockwood, who's still growing. He came in that 2023 class. I mean, you can add in Jay Lindsey in this 2024 class, who's a freakish athlete, but I think he's going to need some time to grow and develop as well. So I think Cubas is number 2. I think number 1 is CJ Dupree, and you got Robbie Oots as your blocking fullback, H-back type of guy that can slip out the backfield and catch the football.
Stephen M. Smith, Touchdown Alabama. And of course, the show is In My Own Words. It's every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday right here on YouTube at 6:30 Central. And Stephen, we've arrived at the all-important offensive line position. Caden Proctor, Seth McLaughlin, they head to respective Big Ten teams. J.C. Latham, I believe it was stated this week by himself and a number of NFL scouts that he believes he can play left tackle at the next level. So there's some spots to be filled here this spring.
There are, Mark, and thankfully for Alabama, you got 3 guys back that have a huge experience. When you look at Tyler Booker, he comes back on that offensive line along that interior. You have Jaden Roberts, massive young man right there who got the start against Texas A&M last year, and from that game throughout the season provided his size, his physicality, his growth there along the interior. And then you have Elijah Pritchett, who played a handful of games as well as an offensive tackle. So those 3 guys are back. Then you bring in Parker Brausford from Washington, the transfer center, who gave only 1 sack last year to Michael Penix Jr., who finished up as a 4,000-yard passer and a Heisman finalist this past year at Washington. Then you also bring in Nikhil Bertrand, transfer from Texas A&M, who's at 6'6", 340 pounds or so. That could be an offensive tackle as well. So you got depth there at that position along the offensive line, but you got 3 to 4 guys back when you talk Booker, Roberts, Pritchett, but of course the transfer Brausford, who's got, marquee playing experience in college football.
Stephen, is there anyone who just signed in this 2024 class that could possibly have a shot at making an impact, getting some reps?
Well, you signed 3 guys in this recent class here, Mark. You talk about Joseph Ionata of a 3-star from Clearwater, Florida, who can be an offensive guard or a tackle. At the collegiate level, he may be more so projected as a tackle. You look at Will Sanders, a big, massive offensive guard from Brookwood High School here in the state of Alabama at 6'4", 290 pounds. And you got big Casey Poe, offensive lineman, 4-star from the Texas area, by the way, of Lindale, Texas. Casey Poe, more so looked at as a guard as well. So those 3 guys, Ionata, Poe, and Will Sanders, we'll see which one of these guys will be able to push and compete for a starting spot here in the spring. It'll be kind of difficult because Alabama signed in a massive haul of offensive linemen in the 2023 class. Yes, Caden Proctor goes back home to Iowa, hooking up there with the Hawkeyes in the Big Ten, but you still have Wilkin Formby, who came in the 2023 class from Northridge High School here in Tuscaloosa. You still have Omas Enganine, by the way of Finland, and came from a high school in Connecticut, but hometown of Finland, he's in here. You have Big Miles McVeigh, by the way of St. Louis, Missouri, and then you have Rock Montgomery, by the way of Anniston High School here in Alabama as well. So of the 3 guys, Ionata, Poe, and Will Sanders, it's going to be a fight for those 3. It's going to be a push because you're competing against heavy talent in that 2023 class that came in.
March 7th is the day, Hogs fans. The football team gets back on the field to try to make themselves better for 2024. Don't want to see another 4-win campaign, do we? Got Ty Hudson here. Talk with Ty. It's right here on YouTube. We're going to break down the Hogs on the offensive side of the ball. Ty, how you doing today?
Mark, I'm doing fantastic, sir. How are you?
I am doing well. And in thinking about the situation, and of course, we've probably had more conversations about KJ Jefferson than any player since you and I have known each other. And for good reason. He's been the guy for a long, long time and connected to a football program as a quarterback for longer than anybody going into this season, anybody in the country, but he's gone. And this would be the first time that Sam Pittman has had to make that all-important quarterback decision. He's got a quarterback battle on his hands, doesn't he? He's got Talon Green coming in from Boise State, Jacoby Criswell in the mix as well.
Yeah, it's odd because you're right. I was having this discussion with somebody not long ago about, man, this is the first time since Felipe Franks. That was his first quarterback who he had to work with in that bizarre 2020 season when he only played 10 games and they're all conference, and they found a way to win 3. Should have been 4. I'm not going to dive into the Auburn fiasco, but great year one with a new coach, new offense, new defense, a whole new thing, and you did it with a transfer quarterback in Felipe Franks, who was coming off a major injury, and without him, I'm not so sure that Arkansas would have been able to win a single game that year or a single conference game, as that's all they played in 2020. So here we are again with Talon Green, who's a transfer, but I don't know if it's going to be as simple as Talon Green just walks in and he has the job. I think it's going to be a little bit of a battle between him and a couple of others.
So based on what you've seen, based on the people that you trust, who do you give the nod to and why? And what are the differences between these quarterbacks?
Oh, well, so last year, Jacoby Criswell, 6'1", 225, 230-pound quarterback, turned heads early on in spring camp last year. I was there. It was my first spring camp to attend, and he turned heads as camp went on, as did everybody. Nobody looked good in the beginning, and apparently nobody ever does. But then you had KJ, who everyone expected to be the guy. I don't know that he ever, there's only so much you can take, right, from even just practices is what happens on the field, that you come away, with the most. But it never felt to me like anybody was going to push KJ. And with this year, it obviously without KJ here, and you've got Jacoby Criswell, who's back. He's going to be a redshirt. He's a 5th-year senior. And then we already mentioned Talon Green, the transfer out of Boise State. And you've also got redshirt freshman Malachi Singleton. You got the true freshman, who I'm told is already on campus, KJ Jackson, who apparently hit a growth spurt. I've read he's taller than what his recruiting profile suggests. I think it's going to be an open battle from start to finish. I don't know who I would probably say. It feels like Jacoby will probably get the nod with the ones. He's not a KJ type of a quarterback, and yet I felt like he's someone who could have been pretty effective in a KJ fitted offense in the veer and shoot, if that makes any sense. He could actually take off, tuck the ball, and run. He wasn't the same type of runner. KJ was more of a bulldozer. I mean, you and I used to joke about that. He was like a linebacker, with the football in his hands. Just ran people over, wasn't afraid of contact. And then he could run by folks too. But Jacoby was more of a finesse type runner who did show off a little bit of physicality. I think arm talent probably better with Jacoby Criswell compared to KJ, or at least I think his ceiling might be up there with KJ. And I don't know that KJ's arm talent is super high. So that's not like a huge compliment. KJ's strengths were that he could just put this team on his shoulders and make plays. That's just what he did up until 2023. And then Talon Green is a different quarterback altogether. Mark, I don't know if you and I have ever talked about Matt Jones at Arkansas or not. He's probably my all-time favorite Razorback, period. I have never seen anybody like that. 6'6" in the NFL Combine, 242 pounds. He ran a 4.37 40. You couldn't see it on television. watching YouTube videos doesn't do it justice. And I can remember the first time I got to see him play, I think it was the tail end of his freshman year. And it didn't matter if he had a good angle on Matt or not. He'd just run right by these guys. It was unreal. But because he was so long, again, 6'6", it didn't seem like he was running that fast. Talon Green gives off similar vibes. Again, 6'6". He's not 242 like Matt was his senior year, but he's 221 pounds as a redshirt junior. And he's pretty fast. You can watch it. Again, I don't know that YouTube videos do those guys much justice, but if you want to see him, run the ball, you could certainly find those videos online. He's an explosive player. And so you have some fascinating options. And then Malachi Singleton, who's kind of similar to Jacoby Criswell in some ways. Obviously, they're like the exact same size, 6'1", 220 or 230 pounds. We're going to learn a lot about these guys. I think, of course, as spring camp unfolds, it's going to be interesting to see who gets the most nods working with the ones. But right now, I would assume it's going to be Criswell simply because he's been with Pittman. He knows Sam's requirements or his just the day-to-day operations, right? He's been there now for a little bit. But at the end of the day, though, Talon Green is Bobby Petrino's guy. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out by the end of spring camp.
I've seen both of these guys play, Criswell and Green. Now, it's not like I watched Talon Green at Boise State with the intent of I'm scouting Talon Green. It was I'm surfing by and I'm going to catch Boise State for a quarter. So it wasn't with any kind of intent to scout him. 11 touchdowns, 9 picks. He's run for 19 touchdowns in his career. And he's thrown the ball 483 times. And to compare these two and their experience level coming in, there's nothing like being out there as the starting quarterback on Saturdays when the adrenaline rush is there and when it's all on the line. And he played for good Boise State teams. They went and won the Mountain West Conference Championship last year. Now, Criswell has only thrown 58 passes in college football, but he's been around a lot of good players and competed in practice for a long time. Talking for 4 years between North Carolina and Arkansas. So you got to think if there's going to be a time for him, now is the time.
Yeah, technically a fifth-year senior. Too many times when I have this conversation with people, Hog fans, it's always, well, yeah, but we got to see Jacoby play at the end of the year against Missouri. That's all I need to know. So I'm just going to write him off. And it's like, yeah, but you do realize that was probably one of the worst performances up front on the line of scrimmage from a blocking perspective that we have seen in a while. I mean, it was pathetic. I mean,
yeah, that ruined my Friday of Black Friday football because I was locked into I'm going to sit here and relax and eat some leftovers and watch Mizzou and Arkansas and hope that Arkansas can give them a game. I know Mizzou's having this great year, but it still should be a good game. The talent difference isn't that. Yeah, it was just a deplorable game.
It was awful. It's the worst performance I think they've put together under Pittman since he's been here. It's got to be up there. And I know Mizzou was really good this year. I'll give them all the credit in the world. They were good. I have no hate.
We're doing a TV ratings breakdown series, and Arkansas fans can feel good that by far that was the most watched Arkansas game last year.
Oh boy. Yeah. That'll make them feel a little bit better, Mark. I guess you got a glass half full, right? Yeah, it was bad, and I kept telling people who wanted KJ benched all year. It became a gag or a joke I would do on my show. Put in Criswell because that's all fans wanted. Put in Criswell. And I kept telling them, look, you're not going to get anything much different. I wish him the best. Maybe he'll have an advantage because Mizzou didn't know, or if he had the opportunity to play, they wouldn't really know, these are two different quarterbacks. How you prep for KJ is not how you prep for Criswell. That's always something you have to consider. But no, in fact, it was the worst performance by a quarterback, I think, all year. I'm sure KJ had a couple other doozies, but nobody was going to have success last year behind that line of scrimmage or behind that offensive line. Nobody. And Criswell proved my point pretty well. And that's all I heard in my Discord. I mean, I had my own mods and Discord telling me no, Criswell, no, he's going to be the better option here, and I just kept saying, well, let's watch. I guess you're going to get your opportunity. And what happened? It was a mess. And yeah, I was hoping for a better game than what we got, and it was just not. You talk about ending the season on just such a bad note. It all begins this week. Your chemistry, your remolding, reshaping of your program starts this week for Arkansas. This is when spring camp starts. And I know we're touching on the quarterbacks, but man, there's so many places on that offense. They've got to get figured out. And it starts this week, and we'll see. I guess we won't really see until fall, but they've got to get off to a good start.
Yeah, so let's get to the running backs. Of course, Rocket Sanders is in one way a huge loss in that he's a big talent and had that ridiculous year 2 years ago. But based on not seeing much of the field last year, 3.5 yards per carry and 200 yards, not a big loss in terms of what he was able to give Arkansas last year. And A.J. Green is off to Kansas State. So who's going to be jumping in there in the backfield?
Well, so you've got a couple of options. I do really like Jaquindon Jackson, the running back they picked up out of Utah. I like him a lot. His numbers last year don't blow you away. If you look at that, he's at 161 carries for almost 800 yards, about 5 yards a carry, 4 touchdowns. He caught the ball 9 times for 53 yards. But the year before that, 2022, he had a great year, 78 carries, 531 yards, 9 touchdowns, a 66-yard run from the line of scrimmage, and he averaged close to 7 yards per carry. When he was recruited, he was actually recruited out of high school as a quarterback. And 247 compared him as a 4-star. They have his 40 here logged down at 4.61. That was at 6'2", 219 pounds. His comparison under 247 is Dak Prescott. And so he transfers to Utah. They turn him into a running back, and again, 2022, he had in terms of yards per carry and even touchdowns, he had a really strong year. So he did have 800 yards last year as a running back, but his yards per carry took a little bit of a dip, and his touchdowns took a dip. He had about 5 yards a carry in 2023 and 4 touchdowns. But he's a very fascinating piece that's been added to the depth chart. You've got Augusta, who ended the year on a decent note, despite the troubles at quarterback, despite the horrific offensive line, the blocking, pass and run blocking. Really, Arkansas is one-dimensional as you get. And Augusta found a way. I mean, he ended the season pretty strong. And I think some people even assume it's going to come down between him and maybe Jackson and DeBinion as leaders out of that room, out of the running back room. And then you do have DeBinion, who's going to be a junior. And by the way, Augusta did burn his red shirt last year, so he will be a sophomore at 6'2", 208 pounds. DeBinion's the other guy who kind of disappeared this last season. And then they've got Dominic Johnson, who it feels like that guy's been here since, I don't know, the Houston Nutt era. 6'1", 250-pound running back. He's, I think technically he is just a fifth-year senior, but it feels like he's been here longer. But they are. There's some options back there, and I'm curious to see how that unfolds as well. And I think with Petrino and his he had some good backs when he was here. I mean, he had some running backs. People forget his first year here. They had running back out of Florida, Smith, who ran for 1,000 yards his first year. He had Niall Davis a little while later. I mean, he had some options at running back that excelled in his offense. So it'll be, again, it's going to be fun to watch, see how this all kind of unravels.
So let's move on to the wide receivers. Isaac Tesla was the big pickup last offseason. He caught 34 balls. Who's coming back, and who do you expect to make a splash?
They're all back. I mean, the fear was, and I get it, that Centennia was going to be the guy, the sophomore who's out of Fayetteville. there was some fear there that he was going to transfer out, and I think that came from the fact that the guy committed to like 3 different schools, and you're always a little bit concerned about, especially a kid who's from Fayetteville who committed first to, I think it was A&M, or maybe it was Oregon and then A&M and then finally Arkansas. But he's still here. Tesla is back. Andrew Armstrong is back. Tyrone Broden, the 6'6" player transfer they got from a year ago. Dozier. They've got some they've got this kid out of A&M, Jordan Anthony, who's apparently just a speedster, just a burner. So we'll get it. I'm pretty sure we'll get it. I think we'll get a chance to see him. I could be wrong. Track season is all year long. So maybe we won't see him, actually, now that I think about that. But yeah, you'll still get to see those guys, the guys that were here a year ago, Andrew Armstrong, Tesla, Centennia, and Broden. So yeah, you're getting experience back there. I still wonder about the overall ceiling for that, for the receiver, for that group of receivers. I don't know that it's real high, and that's what kind of, bringing in Bobby Petrino, a guy who's known for churning out quarterbacks and wideouts and running that offense of his. I don't know. Maybe he'll make them better. Maybe the work that he does with his quarterbacks will pay off and the whole offense will blossom, and that includes the wide receivers. But Armstrong is obviously the guy that most people are excited about, rightfully so. He did have a pretty decent year. But again, the overall talent level to me, outside of maybe Centennia, feels – and I'm going to be eating my words, this time next year or a little sooner. But it just feels to me like the lowest it's been in a while, if I'm being honest. That doesn't mean I think they're going to be bad. I just, talent level-wise, I don't know that it's real high.
Yeah. In a league where the standard is extremely high.
Yeah.
So it can be a decent wide receiver core, but still be one of the worst in the SEC.
Yeah.
Yeah. Armstrong, 56 catches, 13.5 per, 5 touchdowns. And, yes, folks, before anybody flags me in the comments on my pronunciation of, I think I said Tesla. I know it's Tesla.
Yeah.
It's not like the car, but I got familiar with him because we do our Iowa channel, and they thought that they were going to get him in the offseason. So I knew about Tesla well before he signed with Arkansas.
He was a sought after commodity. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I mean, I think it was Colorado. Dion rolled out a Tesla on his visit. Someone Google, I seem to remember that happening. I think I even covered it. Maybe, you jump from story to story so often you forget what you cover, but he was certainly somebody that a lot of people wanted. I put a video out on Twitter, just kind of breaking down his numbers, or just what I had on him at the time. And I think Arkansas may have just offered him at that time, and that's why I put that tweet out. But he was someone who, I mean, Mark, last time we saw eyes on him in camp, he was making some outstanding grabs in practice. I mean, it was like they were highlight reel after highlight reel, and it just never flourished. It never made its way onto the actual field when it mattered, when the game was on. And I hope that changes this year for him. I mean, he's rumored, I think his 40 time, I want to say it's rumored in the like low 4.5s, and for someone that size with that kind of build, that's pretty impressive. He's got a catch radius, Mark. It's got to be, I don't know, it's like a power forward. I mean, he's just got these, I don't know what it is. He's just got a really wide catch radius, good hands. I'm not going to say, Treylon Burks-esque, but we certainly saw some promise there. And so maybe, I don't know, maybe I ought to rethink my talent level evaluation, as far as the ceiling. It still just seems lower to me than it should be, especially with a guy like Bobby Petrino, who I know just took the job, but I kind of thought they'd bring some more folks over from A&M or from the state of Texas. And didn't really happen that way outside of Jordan Anthony. But I still feel like that room is a little bit lower than it should be. And like you pointed out correctly, I might add, that it doesn't matter how good you think you are. What matters is how good you actually are in this league, in the SEC. Even if I think it's taken a step back, over the last couple of years, thanks to the transfer portal. It's still extremely competitive, and that's an area, especially with the kind of offense I think Petrino wants to put in here. You've got to have some playmakers out there.
Got Ty Hudson here, of course, from Tusk Talk with Ty. It's right here on YouTube. You see the X handle right there for Ty. So jump on board and check out. This is the time to do it, folks, because Ty's going to take you right through spring camp. He's going to be there just about every day checking out the Hogs. And Luke Hasz, is he still the tight end? Who's going to play tight end for this team?
Oh my gosh. If they were judged as a team by what they have in the tight end room, it's kind of insane. It's probably, simply because the last 2 years they've been so underwhelming. They won 6 in 22, and obviously what they did in 23 couldn't even make a bowl game. Like everything else is kind of taking a back seat. It's just, oh, well, you're bad. Nothing about you is any good at all. The tight end room is probably going to be the best kept secret. Even though Luke Hasz, like most people know who he is. I think PFF graded him out really high. 6'3", 242 pounds, sophomore. He burned his red shirt last year, but he did get hurt. If you look at his numbers, I don't remember how many games he played in exactly, but he missed a lot of time. I think I believe his numbers could have doubled. I really think he could have had double the numbers, which would have put him close to 40 grabs. Maybe we're talking 5-6 touchdowns. I don't know. We also have to remember how things unraveled throughout the year, and that was outside of his control. But yeah, he is. I remember watching him in camp last year, and every time he was throwing the ball, no matter who was throwing it to him, Mark, nobody was around him. And the secondary ended up being pretty decent this year. It's not like it was when Odom was here. They finally took a step in the right direction in the secondary, finally. And so it's not like he's doing this against a horrific defense. Yeah, their numbers could have been better, but they took a significant step forward. And yet you've got Luke Hasz, who's always wide open in practice when he's getting thrown the ball. Watching him in fastball, which we're unfortunately not allowed to record, but we can watch it with our eyes, and writers can jot down what they see. Meanwhile, I'm typing on my phone as fast as I can because I can't film it. But every time he caught the ball, it didn't seem like anybody was near him, and he was hard to just get hands on. He's a great athlete out of Bixby, Oklahoma. Ty Washington, another guy who, Mark, I think could be a potential second or third team All SEC caliber tight end. Maybe better, just stacked in the tight end room. Just with those guys, you still got Varkey's Gums, transfer out of North Texas a year ago. He never really looked comfortable last year, and if I was around anybody the most in camp, whether it was camp or practice, it was quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends. And the tight ends, they're all the way down on the south part of the end zone, but they're almost right next. If you walk down to the end of the football field, you're right next to the tight ends. I can hear him talk. I mean, it's kind of fun, actually. And he never really looked comfortable to me. And the same with Shamar Easter. That's what I'm really kind of focusing on as well, along with, Petrino back, the quarterback situation, the new faces here and there on the offensive line, which I know we're going to touch on here in a second. But I'm really fascinated to see with how that works out behind Luke Hasz in Washington. Has Easter put on some good weight? That was a criticism of Shamar Easter's. He looked like a tall receiver out at tight end. And then Gums, who just never really looked comfortable. How does he look, assuming we get to see all these guys, which I think we will? I don't think anybody's supposed to miss spring. Again, I'll have to update folks, just based on what I see and what I hear. But yeah, a tight end, it is loaded. It's loaded. It's crazy. And hopefully they can be utilized in ways that they weren't last year. And of course, again, Luke has missed quite a bit of time, but I'd like to see just kind of how they respond in this new offense, another offense for them to learn. So, but yeah, it's stacked, Mark. That is probably their deepest position, maybe no matter where on either side of the ball. It's probably that tight end room.
All right, Ty. You started out this conversation by letting us know and reminding us how bad the offensive line was last year, and you've sprinkled it throughout the conversation. So none of this is going to work. None of the fast guys get to do anything, much of anything, if the offensive line doesn't work. The good thing about teams with bad offensive lines in this day and age, because offensive line is such a developmental position that in the past it was difficult to fix it in 1 year. Because even if you had a great recruiting class, most likely those guys wouldn't have a huge impact, most likely. But with the transfer portal, there's at least the opportunity to fix things quickly. Where do we stand on the offensive line? Is there hope that it can be competent?
Well, so last year like we talked about, it was horrific. And the two guys that were supposed to be standouts last year were not standouts. Well, actually, I guess we could talk, Bo Limmer and Brady Latham, right? Were the two guys that we expected more out of. And I don't know if they did bad, but both those guys, they're expected to get, or not, maybe not get drafted. I think they both got NFL Combine invites, but those guys are gone. You return Chambly, who got some time last year. Tykees Crawford, who got time last year. Kudos. I don't know why I said Kutos, like he's a character off Star Trek. And then Joshua Braun. Okay, they did hit the portal pretty hard, and they've done that for the last couple of years. It really started probably with Chambly when they pulled him in out of Charlotte a couple of years ago. He was originally committed as a 4-star tackle out of high school, committed to Arkansas. I think he ran into some, I don't remember, grade issues. He had to go to Charlotte for a year, and then he came back to Arkansas. And since then, we were all big on him. We thought, oh, well, here's a future NFL draft pick. What I saw was that guy getting, giving up sacks and hurries left and right. Now, PFF, I think, if I remember right, PFF likes him more than I do. But there's folks that I've talked to in the media, I won't name them, but they believe Crawford's going to be a starter. And Mark, if he's a starter, I'm really concerned. I don't know that they made the necessary upgrades. So then they bring in a guy like Fernando Carmona, or I think it's Carmona Jr. out of San Jose State. Keyshawn Blackstock, Addison Nichols, who's out of Tennessee, who's a former 4-star. Some of these guys have great PFF grades, but that's one thing when you're being graded at San Jose State versus coming to the SEC. Those grades don't always translate. So, and we've seen that across the landscape, in college football. You get these guys from Group of Fives or whatever, and and Arkansas just experienced that just this last year with some of the receivers we were just talking about. They graded out high, but they came from no-name schools. What happened last year? How much of it was their fault? How much of it was the offensive line's fault for not giving their quarterback more time to throw the ball? So, yeah, they've got a Marion Harris, another guy we've kind of been waiting on to step up. Paris Patterson, Josh Street, another. I think he's expected to be in the 3 deep this year. I don't know who the starters are going to be, Mark. It's going to be musical chairs, I think, up front. It's probably going to be as competitive at the offensive line spot as it is at quarterback throughout spring and summer workouts and then fall camp. I think it's going to be an ongoing thing. I don't know. Right now, I would probably argue at left tackle. I think Carmona has a shot there instantly, the transfer out of San Jose State. Addison Nichols, between him and Amari Wiggins. I was trying to combine names there. Amari Wiggins, who's been here for, I think they brought him in last year out of JUCO. I would probably say it's going to be between those two there. And then, I don't know, Harris and somebody at that other guard spot. So I don't know. Kudos. Who knows? Maybe he'll stay at right tackle. Maybe he gets moved to the interior. But there's so many questions here, and I just don't have any answers for anybody other than, and this is no disrespect to Tykees Crawford. I don't mean any disrespect, but I just haven't been blown away by his performance since he's been at Arkansas. He's really struggled. And if he ends up being a starter, and maybe he's just really turned the corner. And I've got it all wrong. After all, like you said, this is a very heavily developmental position, and you're right. Maybe he peaks this year. I don't know, but the last couple of years, or last year, he really struggled, I thought. But Again, he's one of those guys who I thought was going to be a multi-year starter, and this year we'd be talking about him in the NFL draft, and that's obviously not the case. But overall, I don't know yet if they've made a significant upgrade here or not. Only time will tell. Some of these guys seem to have pretty high ceilings. Just how high, I'm not sure yet.
Folks, if your record's bad, you go to the offensive line first. And that was the case. The two definitely connected for Arkansas in 2023. Ty Hudson, Tusk Talk with Ty. We will get together for the defense, but in the meantime, you track Ty every day. You see the X handle there, but most notably right here on YouTube. What's the next thing we can look out for? I guess from a football standpoint, you're going to be there on opening day.
Yeah, we've got a Zoom, or you can be there in person, but I'm just not driving all the way over there just for just to do something I could do at home, which is just being on the Zoom call. So I'll have that up hopefully shortly after he's done. So maybe around 2ish tomorrow we'll have that up for everybody, assuming his press conference goes on for probably about 30 minutes. So probably closer to about 1:45 that'll be up. And then I think Thursday we have practice day 1. And then Friday, practice day 2. I think we've got rain in the forecast, so we'll probably be indoors that Thursday and Friday. But yeah, I'm going to have reactionary content to all that. I'm going to upload. If you're a Tusk Talk with Ty Patreon supporter, I'm going to upload my raw reactions, like literally as I'm either walking to my car or in my car. I'm going to give you, like, here's what I'm seeing. Those videos will be short. They'll be on Tusk Talk with Ty Patreon only. They're 2 minutes, just quick little breakdowns, what I saw, what I liked, what I maybe didn't like. Obviously, my first reaction is going to be, oh my God, Bobby Petrino is really here.
Let's move to the defensive side of the football. Of course, we'll head up front. And of course, there's 3 paramount players that are coming back in Jaheim Aotis. You got Tim Smith, you got Tim Keenan. Your thoughts about what the defensive front looks like?
Defensive front's got a nice rotation here, Mark. Guys deep across the board here. You mentioned the main 3, Jaheim Otis, who's changed the spelling of his name by 1 letter. It's not Jaheim, which is J-A-H-I-E-M. It's now Jaheim, which is J-E-H-I-E-M.
Okay.
So he's changed his name by 1 letter this offseason. He's also changed his number, going from 91 to 10. He's going from 91 to 10 here on the defensive line. So big changes here for Mr. Otis, the former 4-star from Columbia, Mississippi, in the 2021 class. You know, that young man right there. When you look at Tim Smith, a season ago, he started to really grow. I mean, his freshman year, the 2020 season, he kind of jumped off the table a little bit. Sophomore, senior season, 2021, didn't have the big burst from the 2020 year. I mean, 2022, did some decent things, but not all that much. But last season, he really started to come out as much as Bama fans thought they would. Bama fans thought they would see more of him early on, but last season, 31 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, really started to take more center stage. The former 5-star from Florida, now at 6'3", 6'4", 302 pounds now. So he's shedded some weight. He's dropped some weight. He's developed more of a pass rush to his game. He's always been kind of a decent, solid run stopper, but now he's developed more of a pass rushing prowess there. So Tim Smith, looking forward to seeing what this year comes for him, especially in the spring, seeing how he took a bit of a jump there in the 2023 campaign. Tim Keenan took a big step this past season in terms of being that 2-gapper in the middle. He was able to wiggle his way through to a sack last season, had 1.5 tackles for loss, but he did have 38 total tackles in 2023. The big performance for him, you go back to that Texas A&M game where he just was everywhere, jumping off the tape against the Aggies. I think he had 9 total tackles and established a presence there in the middle. So Bama Nation looking for even bigger numbers there for Tim Keenan. But Keenan, Smith and Jaheim Otis are not as expected from those three. But other guys, you're throwing Damon Payne Jr., former five-star in the 2022 class, 2021 class, excuse me, by the way of Michigan. A lot of people looking at Payne to have, a big jump here. You look at Jamarian Latham, who came in that 2020 class from Pickens County High School in Reform, Alabama. People are looking for a rise from him. He also changed his number from 93 to 20. So Jamarian Latham going from number 93 to number 20. You got LT Overton, the transfer from Texas A&M. He's in here now. What can he do? What can he bring? What can he provide to this Alabama roster? So there's him. You also got young guys like Jordan Renaud. You got young guys like Hunter Osborne, who came in the 2023 class. Going to be fun to see what can they provide. You got the likes of Jeremiah Beeman, who came in this recent class, 2024, by the way of Parker High School in Birmingham. There's a lot that he brings to the table. You got Steve Mboa, who came from Canada. That guy's a wrecking ball of an early enrollee. That's going to be fun to watch him, the tape he can put onto the field. So there's a lot of depth here in this defensive line rotation, coached by Freddie Roach. How much emphasis he will put on pulling out the best from all of these guys, getting all of these guys in the field. Going to be fun. But the ringleaders of this group, as you mentioned, Mark, it will be Tim Smith, it will be Jaheim Otis, and it will be Tim Keenan.
Stephen, who are those guys on the outside that will get to pin their ears back and go after the quarterback?
That's deep too, Mark, because you got big Quandarius Robinson back. You got guys like Keon Keeley. You got Yancey Pierre. Several just dudes. Jeremiah Alexander kind of rolling there. I mean, you got guys just across the table that will have their opportunity to pin their ears back off the edge, go after the quarterback. Keanu Coote is back as well. Throw him in there. He'll have a shot there. So that there are several guys that have the ability to pin their ears back, come off the edge, and rock the quarterback to the ground. It's just going to be who in this 4-2-5 set, led by Kane Womack as the defensive coordinator, and now outside linebackers coach Chris Robinson, who has a ton of experience in the SEC. When you look at coaching at Auburn, coached at Florida, coached at Mississippi State, coached at Georgia, coached at Ole Miss. The guy's been to half of the SEC, being one Chris Robinson. So looking at him and Kane Womack, which are the guys here on the roster that these two coaches have the most confidence in, putting them out there and having these guys attack the quarterback. But Bama's got the depth there in terms of edge rushers.
Yeah, this team finished 14th in the nation in sacks. Of course, Dallas Turner had a whole lot to do with that, not just his total, but taking pressure off of other guys that could get freed up. So he's gone. Chris Braswell's gone. Tresman Marshall, all those guys have taken their shots at the NFL, of course. So do you feel confident that that gap can be made up, that there's that kind of talent to make up for those kind of players?
I think the talent is definitely there to make up the gap of production that's being lost. You look at Quandarius Robinson, he did get some burn last year and showed his ability to edge being off the snap of the ball, showing the explosiveness, converting speed to power. I like what he brings. Keanu Coote is more so of a freakish athlete, and he's got a little bit more speed than what Robinson has. So that's going to be fun to even watch him. Then you look at a guy like Keon Keeley, that guy's a potential freak show. I mean, just his body type, he looks like a cut between Will Anderson and Terrell Lewis. And that's just scary to think about. When you look at just the body type of Keon Keeley, he's a cut between Anderson and Lewis. Then you got Yancey Pierre. His first cousin is Courtney Upshaw. Just think about that for a minute. Pierre's first cousin is a former Bama legend and Courtney Upshaw. So it's the talent's there. And of course, an inside linebacker, you got Deontay Lawson, who changed his number from 32 to 0. So Bama's got its first agent 0. We're in that number right there. That's Deontay Lawson. And then behind him or next to him, you do have Jihad Campbell, who's changed his number from 30 to 11. So he's going to number 11 now, Jihad Campbell. Those will be your main two inside guys. Behind those two, you have Justin Jefferson, who will get burned out there as well. And then after him, you got just different guys here on the roster that can play that position. Jeremiah Alexander can be an inside guy or an outside guy. He's kind of been cross-trained throughout this time here. So, I mean, you have Justin Okonrokwo, young man from Germany, who came as a 3-star. He's in there in that inside linebacker room as well. So the talent's all across the board. It's in spring ball, who can show I'm the real cream of the crop? And I've said this before, in the 17 years with Nick Saban, you had the constant stability, but at the same time, Coach Saban at points could be a little bit too loyal to particular players. When you look at Kalen DeBoer, he has no ties to you whatsoever. So if you got to show him and his staff, I'm the real deal in order to earn a starting spot here, starting off here in spring practice. So my excitement, Mark, will be on who are the guys that can grab the eyeballs, grab the attention quickly and say, play me, because I'm the guy needing to be on the field.
We've got the incomparable Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama here to break down Bama on both sides of the football. Check out the other videos. You can catch Stephen's work in my own words every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right here on YouTube at 6:30 Central. And get locked in. This is the time to do it. It's spring football. Be an expert and check out Stephen. Touchdown Alabama as well. Well, the defense was 18th in total defense, 17th in points given up. Really strong in the red zone and yards per play, a top 22 unit there. As we move on to the secondary, of course, the big losses there. Caleb Downs through the transfer portal to Ohio State. Trey Amos, a cornerback loss within the conference to Ole Miss. So let's start there at cornerback, and I see a slew of 5-stars coming in at both corner and safety, but how does it stack up? Well, Damani Jackson, of course, coming in from USC. That's a huge addition.
That's a huge addition. And people like to say, well, USC struggled defensively last season. That was not on Damani Jackson. A lot of that was the scheme and the structure from Alex Grinch. That was not on Damani Jackson. This kid, former 5-star, this kid can play. He can flat play. And so coming to Alabama, he's going to be coached by Coach Maurice Linguist, who's got experience in the SEC, who's got experience in the NFL, coaching the Dallas Cowboys. It's going to be fun to see what Coach Mo can do in developing the talent and the technique that is Damani Jackson at one of two corner spots. The corner opposite of him, that will be where the fun is, because you got Jaleel Hurley, who's the lone 2023 scholarship holdover at that cornerback spot. And so you got Hurley from Florence, Alabama. I like Hurley, but behind him, you got the Young Bucks. This is going to be real fun here. With behind Hurley, you got Rydarius Morgan. You got Dre Kirkpatrick Jr. You got Jalen Mbakwe. You got Xavier Brown, who's got Patrick Surtain like teach tape. You got Xavier Mincy. You got dudes at that cornerback spot. So, Damani Jackson can hold down a spot at one corner position coming up from USC. That other spot's going to be a full-on fight through spring ball. And that's going to be where the fun is. Who rises from this pack of young guys to say, I'm ready now, put me in the pan, let me go to work. There could be some growing pains in there, but if the upside outweighs the growing pains, let's see what we got here. So that's at the cornerback spot. Damani Jackson coming over from USC, he would anchor down one area, but the spot opposite him is where the fun starts.
And that bar is sky high, of course, based on the cornerback play at Alabama, and most notably and most recently, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Terrion Arnold. They, of course, are moving on to the NFL. Malachi Moore, of course, good to see him back at the safety position. So he anchors that group back there. So how do you size up the safety spot?
That's going to be fun, too, because you look at Malachi coming back for his fifth season, and big for him because his freshman year, 2020, we remember he exploded onto the scene, and we all thought this guy's going to be, 3 years and gone. after his freshman season, but he encountered some injuries, some tough moments there, and then Brian Branch just really took off. Then, of course, last year we saw Malachi, the bounce-back year, healthy, 52 tackles, 5 of those for loss, 5 pass breakups, 1 interception, showing you he still got it. So this upcoming season, you look at Malachi, he could either be in that Husky Rover, close to the line of scrimmage defensive back to where he is playing those run fits. He's also playing in coverage as well, kind of in that star nickel corner role that he's been known for playing in, or he could be moved to safety due to his experience back there as well. Played a lot of safety in high school, Hewitt Trustfield here in Alabama. So it's going to be interesting to see what do they do with Malachi. Do they keep him closer to the box as that nickel corner, allow him to use that physicality, or do they put him back there at safety and let him utilize those coverage skills? That's going to be fun there. For 2 safeties, you bring over Keon Sabb from Michigan. And here's a guy that can play some ball also. Keon Sabb, a season ago, helping the Wolverines get to a Big Ten championship, college football playoff, and then winning a national championship under one Jim Harbaugh. Sabb has got some versatility. He can play corner. He can play safety. Where does Kane Womack feel the most comfortable placing him? And if he plays safety, opposite him, you got Devontae Smith, who is back. He missed a lot of time last year due to a foot injury. He came back the latter portion of 2023, played in the SEC championship game, got some burn there in the Rose Bowl. So you have him back. And then you got Tony Mitchell, former 5-star in that 2023 class from Thompson High School. He came in the same class with Caleb Downs. Of course, Downs became the big star. He's now at Ohio State now, by the way, the transfer portal. But Tony Mitchell can ball. He came in at 6'2", 205 pounds. He's probably at 210 now. And then Tony Mitchell at the bowl prep there for the Rose Bowl did a lot of work there running with the second team. So this Alabama secondary, gonna be fun to see how this shapes up. You got Peyton Woodyard, who came in that 2024 class, by the way, of St. John's Bosco High School in California. That young brother can play too. So the safety position, the corner position, you got some veterans there. When you discuss Malachi Moore and guys with experience, Damani Jackson, Keon Sabb, Devontae Smith, a little experience there this past season at Alabama. But this secondary, it's going to be competition. Who wants it bad enough? And spring ball is going to be exciting, Mark.
That's a lot of names, and I know all of them can run. That's for sure. And of course, I don't remember what Bama back it was, but Keon Sabb made himself, he had a introductory greeting there at the Rose Bowl. I remember out there in the flat, he met somebody out there in the second half.
Yeah, he put a lick on somebody out there in that matchup. So this secondary, Coach Mo Linguist, who will primarily coach corners, Coach Scott Hitzler, who's got this massive safety background. Going to be fun to watch these two coaches develop this back end of this defense.
Well, Stephen, it's certainly got to be a sense of pride and a very unique experience to be able to say, I am the all-time scoring leader in college football. And Will Reichert can say that. And regardless of what he ever does at the next level, he will be and is at this point the all-time scoring leader in college football, which is an amazing accomplishment, of course. But he moves on. The punter's back. The guys returning the punts and kickoffs, when you look at Downs and McKinstry, of course, they've moved on. So kind of size this up in the special teams area.
Well, first and foremost, thank goodness you got James Burnett back, flipping the field from a punting aspect. Made huge improvement between his first year and this past season. This past year, I think he averaged a little over 48 yards a punt. He really did well. In the Rose Bowl, Burnett was the MVP. I mean, he was pinning Michigan back inside the 20 several times in that matchup. So very huge to have James Burnett here back in the fold.
And not to cut you off, Stephen, but of course he almost won the game. When
I'm telling you, he did. He nearly. I'm telling you, if Bama holds on and wins 20-13, you would have to give the MVP to Burnett. you would literally have to give the MVP to James Burnham. That's how good he was. I mean, on the punt that his legs got taken out in, I mean, that punt was a 55, 60-yard boomer. I mean, he really made a jump from the first year, 2022, to last year. An impressive jump, but happy to have him back. When you look at the kicking aspect, it's crying tears, losing Will Reichert. As much as you want to give him another year, he's off to the NFL, and congrats to that young man. Accomplished so much in his time here in Tuscaloosa. The NCAA's all-time leading kicker, scored where points are concerned, but not just that. He was the one that erased all the kicking woes that happened across the landscape. When you look at Alabama football, a guy that you never had to worry about, is the kick going to go through? You had the confidence that 16, wearing that jersey from Hoover, Alabama, was going to make the kick, and wish the absolute best for Reich, whichever team picks him up in the NFL draft. But Connor Talty, who came in the 2023 class, spent a lot of time around Reichert. Reichert kind of took him under his wing, coached him up a whole lot, a great deal. So hopefully a lot of the lessons that Talty took from Reichert have rubbed off on him, and we can see a continuation of greatness in the kicking game from Connor Talty. When you discuss the kickoff return, punt return specialist here, I look at guys like Kendrick Law could have a shot here. I look at a Kendrick Law. I look at a Emmanuel Henderson. And E-Man would have been the punt returner last year, but he got a hip injury in summer workouts and fall camp, and that was tough there on E-Man, but he's back healthy. So Kendrick Law, Emmanuel Henderson could do it. Kobe Prentice, a guy that's got speed to burn coming out of Calera High School. That could be an interesting role for him. Cole Adams could be an interesting role for him, returning kicks and or punts. So Bama's got a few names there that can do it. It's going to come down to who feels the most comfortable fielding the ball cleanly, judging the bounce of the ball cleanly, and just when the ball hits your hands, having that ability to catch, go, and create excitement. So that's going to be the main thing there, is who has the natural instinct for the ball, fielding it well, and just providing some excitement once you get it.
Well, Stephen, you know that I love these personnel breakdowns, so thank you so much. I will be spending the spring, and every time that I go to Bama, about every day, and try to check in, and then especially when I watch the A-Day game, then I'm like, find myself saying, "Oh, Steven said this," and "Oh yeah, Steven told me that." "Oh yeah, I remember this battle. Okay, I got it." So you keep me ahead of the curve. I appreciate it, Stephen. It's always a pleasure, and enjoy Alabama spring practice. Who do you watch more, College Football Nation, the SEC or the Big Ten? Well, we did that video as we matched up all the conferences. Check out the video links down in the comments section. Here we look at the SEC and break down the individual teams as we did with the Big Ten. SEC, 14 teams in 2023. Of course, Oklahoma and Texas jumping on board in 2024. Let's check out the viewer stats from this past football season. Alabama, the very best, possibly in all of college football. We'll wait until we get all the conferences done and all the teams across college football. But over 47 million folks watched Alabama on their network appearances. We do not have SEC network metrics here. This is on CBS, ABC, and ESPN for these SEC teams. For Bama, it's 47 plus million. That's 5.91 million per game. So we're just looking at conference games on this particular graphic first and foremost. And number 2 is Georgia at just under 41 million total for 8 conference games. We will take a look in a second at what networks picked up these games, but for Georgia in particular, they're boosted by the fact that CBS aired 5 of their 8 conference games. Next in line, you've got Tennessee coming in at just under 30 million total, just under 5 million per game, with 4 of those games on CBS. You have Auburn, despite another down season, at 6-7, coming in at number 4 in the SEC at just under 4 million per game. LSU's at number 5. On down the list, Missouri, of course, had to be boosted by playing more meaningful games than they've played in a decade, as they had a huge viewership total on CBS against both Tennessee and especially against Georgia. 7 million people watched Georgia take on Missouri in a key SEC Eastern Division matchup. Mizzou was the only team that really had a shot at Georgia last season in division play. And as we go down the list, I really think this is going to pan out well for the SEC in comparison to the other conferences, as more than 2 million people on average watched every team in the SEC. We left out South Carolina and Vandy. We will put them at the bottom of the list because South Carolina only played 2 games on network television, and those were boosted by appearances, especially against Georgia, which was the second-rated game of Week 2, and then also a game against Texas A&M. And then Vanderbilt only played 1 game. That was against Georgia. The rest were on the SEC Network, the ACC Network, and the CBS Sports Network. And so you see in last place among the teams that qualified was Mississippi State. Again, 5 games on networks, 4 of those on ESPN, 1 on ESPN2, and Mississippi State still eclipsed over 10 million views total and over 2 million per game. The SEC and CBS have been synonymous for college football showcases since the early 1990s. This 2023 season historic because it's the last year that CBS is covering the SEC. And of course, the SEC has thrived with its biggest games on CBS. And it is certainly no coincidence. The biggest games are on CBS and they draw the biggest numbers. Therefore, Alabama had 5 of its 8 conference games on CBS. Georgia, 5 of 8 as well. Auburn, 2 out of their 5 that were in the rating. So the other 3 Auburn games were on the SEC Network. And then on down the line, again, CBS showing the best teams. They also showed Tennessee 4 times as well. And by no coincidence, Tennessee was number 3 in the rankings. In total, ESPN showed the SEC 41 times and 4 games on ESPN2. And those are conference games only. When Alabama and Texas get together in the future, it of course will be an SEC conference game, but not so in 2023 on ESPN. The highest rated game on ESPN outside of Colorado, of course. They were the darlings, Coach Prime and the Buffs in 2023, but 8.7 million people watched Bama and Texas. Other notable games, of course, even eclipsing that one, although I mentioned the Bama-Texas game first because there was competition against that game. There were 10 or 12 other games on at the same time that people could watch, as opposed to LSU and Florida State. 9.1 million people watched it, so that was the highest rated game, most viewed game for an SEC non-conference game. But however, you had to watch that game if you were watching college football on that ABC on that Labor Day weekend. Other non-conference games eclipsing the 3 million mark included Georgia Tech. Now, these two teams usually play a noon game on the last weekend of the season, but it was moved to night, and it was on ABC, and they got over 5 million views for a fairly close game. Alabama, of course, challenged by South Florida. That was a surprise on ABC at 3:30 Eastern Time, and almost 5 million people watched that game as well. We see Miami, Texas A&M. That was a fairly entertaining game. The second weekend of the season, 4 million people watched it. Utah, Florida, that was the Thursday night game that was only challenged by one other game out of the Big Ten, Nebraska and Minnesota on that opening weekend. 3 million plus watched on ESPN. And also on that initial weekend, North Carolina, South Carolina on ABC at 3.4 million for a 3:30 Eastern Time game. The SEC had its shortest and least successful stint in the college football playoff since the first year of the playoff in 2014, as Alabama lost the first game in 2014, lost the first game at the Rose Bowl against Michigan in 2023. So the one college football playoff game for the SEC, the least in its 10-year history going back to 2014. But it was a big matchup and a big rating. The number one viewership game in all of college football for the entire season. Bama, Michigan, 27.7 million. After the national championship game, over 10 million people watched Georgia and Florida State as the third highest rated postseason game, despite 63-3. And then right in order, the SEC and the Big Ten. Look at all those. This is the future of college football right here in a nutshell. Look at games number 4, 5, 6, and 8. Those are all the SEC against the Big Ten. And the only reason LSU and Wisconsin was eclipsed by Liberty and Oregon is because it was the Fiesta Bowl and it was played on ESPN rather than ESPN2 for the LSU-Wisconsin game. Clemson and Kentucky with the Wildcats showing up for the SEC at over 3 million. Texas A&M, Oklahoma State in the Texas Bowl had over 3 million views in a close competitive game. Auburn and Maryland there in the least watched SEC Bowl game on ABC. Bama and Georgia have owned the SEC on the field. They own the television sets as well. Tennessee with a good showing despite just a 8-4 season following 10-2 in 2022. So the Vols stay relevant. And of course, they play Alabama every year. So that boosts the numbers as well. And also the interesting part going forward is, of course, the entry of Oklahoma and Texas into the SEC. They dominated the Big 12. Of course, we're going to get to the Big 12 and the ACC next. But we will see the gap, the void that is going to be left by Oklahoma and Texas leaving the Big 12 and most of those TV ratings behind as they join the SEC and bolster the SEC even more in its dominance against the landscape of college football. Check out the Big Ten video. Compare it to the SEC. It's awfully close, but we will have to give the nod to the SEC. Top to bottom, much stronger in regards to bringing viewers to the TV sets. Your thoughts down below. Please like the video and subscribe, of course, right here at the Voice of College Football.